Okay, good morning. Good morning. I would like to welcome all of you to the 9th Annual Ain Shams University International Conference with the title Fourth Generation Universities Between Reality and Inspiration. This is the third session of the basic science sector. This session will begin at 9:30 and end at 10:30 Cairo local time. I would like to welcome all the participants remotely and welcome all the speakers and would like also to thank the organizing committee for having us, all of us today at this session. I would like also to thank Dr. Wala Said, Vice President of Faculty of Agriculture, who is joining me on this in this session. According to the agenda, the session lasts for 1 hour and the organization will be as follows. We're having 2 speakers. Each speaker will have 20 minutes to present. Then Dr. Wala will summarize the 2 presentations, and then we will give 20 minutes for questions, if any. First, we're going to start with Dr. Ayman Farid Abu Hadid, former Minister of the Ministry of Agriculture and Land Reclamation, Professor at Department of Horticulture at Ain Shams University. He is also a former President of Agriculture Research Center and Head of Egyptian Environmental Affairs Agency. Dr. Farid, welcome to the session, and we are looking forward to hear your presentation. Please go ahead. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Hanan, and thank you for all the participants. I can see that we have something in the neighborhood of 300 participants in this meeting, and I wish you all a pleasant time. Allow me to start my presentation, and the presentation will be on the global climate change and its impact on Egyptian agriculture. First of all, I would like to emphasize the importance of agriculture in the Sustainable Development Goal. The first priority is the zero poverty. And in order to achieve this in Egypt, we have to elevate the standard of living of the farmers and the income of the small farmer in particular. The second is zero hunger, and this will depend on the availability of food and the quality of food as well. Good health also depends on agricultural production and the safety of the food available for the community. And if we go throughout the 17 Sustainable Development Goals, we will find a very close relation with agriculture production. This is one thing. The other thing is climate change, which is a phenomena that's not new, because on the Earth there has been several ice ages rotated with rain ages. And therefore, this is one of the very known phenomena on the Earth, that the climate is not stable. It is changing depending on the ages. But the issue is the increase of industrial activities resulted in emission of greenhouse gases, which facilitated and accelerated the phenomena of climate change, and we call it the greenhouse gases. And when we talk about that, we talk about the increase in temperature in particular, that with each degree increase in average air temperature, there is an effect on food, an effect on water, and on ecosystem as well. And there is also related things related to the extreme weather events which destroy the economical activities in many cases on the earth. All these risks actually have a reflection on agriculture, where in the past, the farmer used to depend on their experience and knowledge to schedule irrigation and to manage the crop. But with the climate change, these things have changed. Climate change have altered the conventional assumptions and may also alter the reliability of water management systems on agriculture. The climate change can affect the temperature, for example. It is predicted that during the 21st century, there will be an increase in temperature. Several models have assured this, and some of them has indicated an increase of 1 or 2 degrees Celsius. Some others, more pessimistic, predicted 4 to 6 degrees more than average of air temperature on the earth. And this will really has a severe impact on agricultural activities. The other phenomena related to climate change is the seawater level. Due to the melting of ice on the top of mountains, due to the melting of ice in the poles, the North and South poles, and due to the disappearance of glaciers in the ice area of the poles, there will be an increase in seawater level, and this will affect the lowland close to the water bodies like oceans and Mediterranean. One of the major area that will be affected by the harm effect of increased seawater level is the Nile Delta in Egypt. Therefore, we have to look at also the extreme events. The extreme events can be severe winds, can be flood of rain, sudden and sporadic, but very heavy rain that destroy the infrastructure of several places. And we can see, for example, these photographs from Alexandria in 2015 that increased the water. Also in Sinai in 2016, the heavy rains, and even in Cairo, where the streets were submerged under the heavy rainwater. The challenge of agriculture sector are numerous. First of all, we have to cope with increasing water scarcity. That is required as a main input for agriculture. The second thing is the salinization of soils due to the evaporation and accumulation of salts in the soil. And also the impact of global change is related to the previous points and resulted in the next points. There will be a problem on water governance, how to deal with the distribution of water among agriculture and other economical activities to assure the food availability in the first place and to assure availability of water for others, for other activities. We have to upgrade the badly organized institutions in the sector of agriculture in particular, and generally speaking. And I think that nowadays we are witnessing a remarkable increase in the organizational institution restructure and inventions that the government and the president is pushing to achieve it in short time and with a very successful attitude. Also, the information availability and the fragmentation between different organizations has to be solved. So climate change, therefore, will be one of the more important things. For example, the Nile Valley and the Delta is the major irrigated agriculture area in Egypt. The fragmentation of land also is a real problem. Together with the lack of water, the increase in population, it is remarkable increase in population, and the per capita water share has dropped from the beginning of the 20th century, which was 5,000 cubic meter per capita. Now it is a little, maybe less than 500 cubic meter per capita. This is 1/10 of the normal share of water per capita that we knew in the beginning of the 20th century, and it is decreasing also. Besides the natural and phenomenon and the increase in population, there is also political crises that occur and that may threaten our water availability. And this is a real problem. We have to look for the maximization of water use by increasing the land expansion, by increasing and updating the human resources available to manage this land, and by increasing the crop productivity by introducing new crops and better crops that can tolerate environment and tolerate pests and diseases. The first issue related between climate change and agriculture is the Nile availability. Egyptian agriculture depends on the Nile River, and the Nile River system is actually, we have the Nile, then the main canal, which is grade number 2 of the canals, and then we have the branch canals, and then we have 2 other small canals, which is the Mesqa and the Merwa. And this system is very efficient in the past, but for the future, we have to look for better system. This is a picture for agricultural activities in the Delta, depending on lifting water from the drainage to irrigate the fields. And of course, the drain water is not as fresh as the Nile water. And therefore, it affected the productivity of the crop, it increased the salinity of the land, and so on. Also, the use of fossil fuel to lift the water from the canals to the field is, first of all, expensive. Second, it is not very efficient in terms of economy. Look at this Merwa, for example, and see the orifice of the Merwa. It is very much uniform. And this will allow little water to pass through and will allow huge surface to evaporate water. And therefore, the losses of water from the old system is huge. And we can say that the new modern irrigation system can save water up to 35% of the water used now for agriculture. And therefore, we have to consider the change of the old surface irrigation system to modern irrigation systems very swiftly, and whatever it takes. The importance of this issue is it will, first of all, allow to utilize 10% of the area of 5 million faddan. 10% is 500,000 faddan occupied by water conveying system. This will be available for utilization. Also, it will reduce the evaporation by 35%, the utilization of water, and it will increase the productivity by 15%. And therefore, we have to look at the 5 million faddan that we should target to improve from the surface irrigation into the modern irrigation system. And this will, the calculations made for this project indicate that it is very feasible. In 10 years' time, all the expenses that will go for the improvement of water systems all over the Nile Valley and Delta will be paid back, because the saving water, 35% of water, will allow to reclaim about 3 million faddan, depending on this water. And the reward coming from the new land and also from the improvement of productivity in the old land will be much more than the expenses in the 10 years' time. That is a very important issue we have to look at. The second issue that we have to look at is the improvement of crops and the planning of agricultural area. We have to look at the agricultural area here in the north of Egypt. That is where the green shadow prevail. And in Upper Egypt, the increase on agricultural land should be only to maintain the community need, but not on large scale agriculture due to the very high water utilization in this area. Also, Egypt has the highest illumination from solar energy in the world, in even half of the area of Egypt, and therefore we have to generate electricity in the south of Egypt, depending on the solar radiation, and make it available for agricultural activities and other. There are several sciences that we have to look at to confront the impact of climate change and to improve agriculture. One of them is remote sensing. The second is biotechnology, which we have to look at to improve the productivity. We have reached the top productivity in wheat, in white maize, in sugarcane, and we cannot lift more than that without using the biotechnology. We have also to adapt and adopt the simulation models and the smart agriculture for the precision agriculture in order to achieve the best production per plant and for each crop. We have also to look at the greenhouses, which reduce the amount of water utilized to produce the same amount of crops. For example, tomato, we are producing tomato from 400,000 acres every year. The productivity from this area can be produced in only 50,000 acres of greenhouses. And we can leave 350,000 acres for other crops to grow. And therefore, and also with their water available. And therefore, we have to look at the best utilization of greenhouses for producing vegetables and a high cash crop in order to save land for commercial strategic crops.
Further production. Left, please.
Okay. Further production is very important, and we have to look at the possibility of increasing the production of sprouting the seeds in the animal production system in order to make it available for them, for the animals. And therefore, we can reduce the dependence on green fodder from open field, and therefore reduce the water needs. Several issues can be made to confront the climate change, and to achieve food security under the expected harsh conditions of climate change. Also, there are points related to fish production, which is also related to climate change, because the increase of heat will increase the temperature of water and therefore will increase the fish production, and this we can utilize in aquaculture to improve the productivity. By this, I think that we have to take the best output that science can allow in order to improve agriculture production under climate change issue. And thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Farid, for this interesting presentation. Although this is not my specialization, but I enjoyed it very much, and there was a lot of information provided within your talk. Thank you so much. Your presentation was with the title, International Climate Changes and Their Effect on Egyptian Agriculture. Thank you, Dr. Farid. Now we're moving to Dr. Professor Hussein Mansour.
Hello?
Yes, Dr. Hussein Mansour, let me first introduce you, please. Dr. Hussein Mansour is currently the first chairman of the National Food Safety Agency that established in Egypt since July 1st, 2017. He is also a promulgate and embraced the idea of changing food safety system in Egypt and the establishment of a national authority for food safety since 2003. The presentation is entitled The Role of Food Safety Authority, whether on exports or imports. Dr. Hussein, you're going to have 20 minutes to present, and we are all looking forward for your presentation. Thank you. Go ahead, please.
Thank you, Dr. Hanan, and thanks for the organizers for this important family of Ain Shams University and my colleagues. I'm very happy to be with you. I've been some time away from the university, busy with changing the food safety system culture in Egypt. My presentation is quite restricted to a certain sector related to import and control system. The objective of my presentation is to introduce the changes underway to modernize Egypt food import and export control approach, to engage with stakeholders community on the proposed changes and future direction of Egypt food import and export control. Before I start, I would like to emphasize that Egypt rank in the time of release at border is quite shameful for Egypt. We are a number 160 among 170 countries all over the world. The time of release in Egypt is 33 days. Our target is to reduce it into 3 days and in later stage in only 1 day. The National Food Safety Authority of Egypt has exclusive and sole mandate to oversee food safety and administer food imports and export, among other things which are related to all food handling, whether establishing after harvesting. This mandate confirmed through NIFSA in January 1st, 2017 law, which is law of establishing NIFSA, and the executive regulations that appeared 2 years later. The mandate oversees the food import and control system transferred to Egypt since November 17 in 2019. NIFSA food import and control framework will cover food imports, export as per legal definition of food, as food defined to be any product which is fresh or semi-processed or processed or sold on market or imported or exported, which is after harvesting. The objective of the import control system is to ensure optimal protection of Egyptian consumer from risk associated with import food, while enhancing the efficiency of import clearance at point of entry. As I said, our target is to reduce it from 33 days into 3 days only. NIFSA is to act as a facilitator to ascertain that the requirements of the export country competent authority are met. For export is a little bit different. We are ensure that the food export comply with the Egyptian food control condition and measures. In the same time, we are obliged also into satisfying the country importing our food to satisfy their requirement if there is any differences from ours. In another word, NIFSA may act as a foreign competent authority as a proxy of the Egyptian exporter. Regarding the import, in the first part of this presentation, we have pillars for the import control framework. Those pillars depend on preventive management, which is with stronger emphasis on pre-border control, expedite clearance and simplified procedure. Intervention should be taken after the release. The principle of modernized approach starts from predictability and the transparency of food regulatory intervention. Alignment with guidance of Codex Alimentarius Commission, FAO, WHO, and WTO. It's very important that to comply with WTO, Egypt signed in 1995 the GATT agreement in WTO and became part of our regular local legislation. And they assume non-discriminatory between the food import and domestic food products. It's very important to keep this compliance with the WTO agreement. Incentive-driven approach through a gradual reduction of inspection to import who demonstrate enhancing and robust control. In Egypt here, we use the word, we would like to have a difference between Ahmed and Hag Ahmed. We should differentiate between the good complying business and the non-one. Highly iterative approach, which is stochastic, focused on continuous improvement. The iterative approach to import control starts with immediate proposed changes to the implemented through a transition period. Transition period will support NIFSA to generate data on food import and export performance. And this is extremely important in designing the risk-based management for the import and export control. Thirdly, utilizing this data, as NIFSA will transition to second phase that will be more evidence-based with a strengthened risk-based approach. Finally, NIFSA committed to continuous improvement for the food import and control system. Inherited system, which is currently being used, it depends only on activity is taken at border. The new approach depends on three things. Action should be taken before control, action should be taken at border, and action should be taken post-border. That is the main strategy of what we are trying to do. For pre-border control, it depends on four things. Recognition of foreign country system, import control licensing for the people they are importing the food, recognizing the third party for food system as TPA, and those TPA must be recognized by NIFSA. Fourthly, the degree of food risk. According to those three criteria, we are going to treat the food at border and to reduce the time of release. At border, we will be document to control mainly, inspection to ensure that what we have received is what we have seen. And then we will release it under two conditions, either temporary release or final release. In both cases, effective monitoring, traceability, and the recall should be enhanced. In this slide, we can summarize the new policy for import, which is dependent on the first part on the screen. This part is from the country that we have recognized their system of control, all this upper part. And according if there is third party which is certified or not. According to that, the sampling will be reduced from 100% to only 4%, or 20% or 40%, or depend on the pass, which is going to be green, yellow, orange, and red. For the red, which is 100%, this is only for countries that we are not recognizing their system of food control. The food are very high risk, and there is no information about the food before it comes to Egypt. That according to this matrix, the decision is going to be made, and for certified importer, then it will be reduced only into 2% up to 100%, depending on the 4 criteria I already administered. The next step is that NEFSA will incrementally transition towards the new import control system. This import control system has been administered for the community 6 months previously, and we discussed it in 5 conferences, and followed by 4 technical regulations that's going to be applied on April 1st. Each element will be subject to regulatory provision to be developed. NEFSA will be engaged with and seek feedback from stakeholders. NEFSA will utilize principle for continued improvement. For the export management new system, NEFSA shall exercise all required function and power, and shall particularly set term and rule governing the issuance of certificates necessary for exporting. We have a very strong assumption that is any food produced in Egypt must be safe, whether that food is going to be exported or going to be used locally. In the same time, for the exported part, it must also comply with the foreign exported needs. Our depend on export to country is a very sector approach. A specific requirement for market of access must be compliant, non-prescriptive approach, general requirement of safety and quality based on codex, standard guidance, first and country of origin of system. In another simple word, the food export is relying on 2 main steps. One step, it is safe as produced in Egypt. Second step, it's comply with the export needs according to the Codex standard and WTO requirement. NEFSA to establish a special compliance verification regime in cooperation with competent authority of the import country. It goes through 2 systems, either by establishing third party to be authorized from NEFSA, or to be administered by NEFSA itself. Situation for prescriptive regime of destination of country depend on recognizing NEFSA oversight on establishment. The establishment is that going to get the food from the farmer for fresh food, for as a packaging, or as establishment for processing, must go to certification of to be certified for export, or accreditation by third party. NEFSA food regulatory mandate applied to export control in a market with perspective requirement. NEFSA export control efforts can promote market access through added credibility to export certification. Possible setup of incremental requirement of safety and quality to certify export. Food export safety scheme for Egypt is going to be continuous improvement along the time is coming. The possible NEFSA intervention is collaboration with our partners, producers, exporters, agriculture department, because other part of the export is related to plant quarantine. We are obliged by WTO to satisfy sanitary and phytosanitary requirement to exporter country. By phytosanitary, it is plant quarantine mandate. By sanitary, it is NEFSA mandate. Then cooperation with Department of Agriculture is extremely important, as well as with the exporter. Egypt Food Export Safety Scheme will develop and administer dedicated compliance with verification system. Accreditation of third party is also one of the possibility as arm to facilitate the export to Egypt. At the end, overall NEFSA strategic intervention for export safety start with enhancing food safety technical regulation. NEFSA produced in the last year 3 technical important regulation, one of them for microbial contamination, one for additives, and one for drug residue in meat and animal products. And next month, we will see pesticide technical regulation and chemical contamination. These 5 pieces of technical regulation are very important to save food, not only for export, but for the local market as well. In particular, the microbial one was not made in Egypt since 1966, which is now, it is under the publication in the official gazette. The second thing is enhancing conformity assessment measures, dedicated and targeted programs applicable in both cases, perspective and non-perspective requirement of export market. Finally, maintaining NEFSA leadership and credibility, which is very important for the countries overseas outside Egypt, that we do in Egypt what is being done in overseas according to Codex, GFSI, WTO, and other well-organized organization. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Hussein Mansour. Thank you so much for this interesting presentation and for keeping the time also. Thank you so much. Now, we are all looking forward to hear my colleague, Professor Dr. Wala Sayed, Vice Dean of Postgraduate Studies and Research at Faculty of Agriculture, Ain Shams University, who will summarize the 2 presentations that we have and spotlight on some of the basic topics addressed within the presentation. Dr. Wala.
Thank you, Dr. Hanan.
Thank you so much.
First of all, thank you for Dr. Ayman and Dr. Hussein for all very useful information about the 2 critical issue in agriculture. Firstly, I would like to make some open discussion with Dr. Ayman firstly, then Dr. Hussein Mansour. Dr. Ayman, all the Egyptians heard about the huge project from President of Egypt, Fattah el-Sisi, give sign to begin the project New Delta. And maybe not a lot of people know the advantage of this project in agriculture area. Maybe you can give us 5 minutes explanation about this new huge project which will be effect.
يعني هل ممكن ان انا افهم ان كده السؤال كان عن the question was related to the new delta of Egypt and some information about it. Actually, this project is a wonderful project to expand agricultural production of Egypt, and the area of this delta approach to 1 million faddan. 500,000 faddan depends on the underground water in the Egypt Future project near Al-Dab'a Cairo highway. And the other is 350,000 faddan, depending on the improvement and desalinization of agricultural drainage water to be utilized in agriculture. Both of the two projects actually are located in the green area of Egypt, which is the north of Egypt to the west of the Nile Delta. I think that the water resources in this area for both of the two sectors are available for sustainable production. The good thing in this project is it is in an area where the climate is mild, close or very near to the Mediterranean coast, and therefore the temperature is not very high, and the water consumption will be therefore less than other areas in the south of Egypt. And the production, the agriculture production in this project will depend on the modern irrigation system totally. And the utilization of water, therefore, will be the highest possible efficiency, depending on the state-of-the-art technologies and knowledges in agriculture system. I think this can cover briefly the new Delta project, but I would like also to emphasize, Dr. Wala, on other projects, because there is also another project which is the 100,000 faddan of greenhouses, and this is a wonderful project that can bring Egypt to one of the highest, of the largest producers of greenhouses in the world. If we know that Almeria, in Spain, the area is 65,000 faddan, and it produces agricultural production from greenhouses to cover 80% of the needs of Europe for vegetables. And therefore, the new project for the greenhouses will be a wonderful project, and it will also open remarkable amount of new jobs, because each faddan of greenhouses will require at least 6 workers specialized in different specialization. And that means that the 100,000 faddan will open opportunity for more than 600,000 new jobs. And I think the cost of the project is, if we divide it by the number of persons which will work on it, will be the least expensive job opportunity in Egypt.
Thank you very much,
Dr. Ala, would you allow me to make one comment and question to Professor Ayman?
Sure, sure.
Thank you. For my comment, I think it is very important as a policy resulted from Professor Ayman presentation, that new policy for importing food which is highly consumed of water should be in action comparing with producing this type of food in Egypt. In another word, for example, the meat in particular, each kilogram of red meat consumes 16,000 liters of water. That by importing the needed amount of water, well, it means that we are indirectly import millions of hectares or millions of cubic meters of water. That's my comment. My question is, Dr. Professor Ayman has presented to us quite many points which is make us worry about the future in terms of change for the climate and the effect in particular on water and salinity and the level of underground water in North, in Delta. Is this need that our expand and our future project must be in the Upper Egypt, not in the North? Do you think that it is because he made an assumption that with agriculture in the Upper Egypt should not take place as in the Upper Egypt? If the Upper Egypt has no future because of the climate change, why we invest there? Why we invest in North if the North has no future, and if the Upper is the future, why we start investing from now in the infrastructure which is enable people to live in the Upper Egypt? I expect as a result of what Dr. Ayman presented, that migration from Delta will take over into the upper place. Then we need from now to look at the upper as a future of Egypt, whether in agriculture, and a new map for agriculture should be in place, taking in consideration the amount of return of each cubic meter. If we are producing, then our choice for the agriculture crops that should be planted in the country must be one of the important pillar for them must be on how much water is consumed to produce 1 kilogram of water. In another word, the water footprint for each commodity should be in our policy for agriculture mapping in Egypt.
Well, allow me to reply briefly on this. Dr. Hussein, thank you very much. I'm sure that you know that Upper Egypt need improvement and need development, but not in particular in agriculture. Why? Because the evaporation from from Aswan, for example, from Toshka area, is 25 millimeter per day, according to PISH measurement. The evaporation in Nubaria area is only 5 millimeter per day. That means each faddan in Toshka will consume water that is enough for 5 faddan in Nubaria. And therefore, the major development in agriculture should be in areas where the least amount of water is used. This is one thing. The other thing is when there is a need for agriculture expansion to cover social issues in Upper Egypt, we have to increase the amount of agriculture, but not with major agricultural production in order to save our water. The second point that I would like to emphasize, it is very good to know the amount of water and the footprint of water, and I'm happy that a specialized person in animal production is also talking about this, because animal production consume, especially large animal, consume a lot of water, and still we have to maintain production at least for partial fulfillment of the local market needs. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Farid, and thank you, Dr. Hussein, for these comments. And I would like to ask Dr. Wala El-Sayed, my colleague, if he has written some of the recommendation for the session based on the two presentations we had, because we have only 5 minutes left, and I'm getting a lot of notes from the audience that they need to spotlight some of the recommendation of the presentations. So Dr. Wala, can you please summarize some of the major recommendations that were presented?
I think for the discussion, Dr. Ayman Abu Hadid summarized all the important issue, and also Dr. Hussein Mansour. If we have 5 minutes, can I ask Dr. Hussein Mansour about one important questions?
Yes, sure.
Yes. I know that you faced a lot of problem to active the food safety organization. And we have a big issue about contaminated foods with pesticides and heavy metals, especially in the Egyptian market. And maybe can you give us in 3 minutes to the heavy metals in Egyptian market?
Because there was a little bit of interruption in the sound. Would you just repeat it, the last statement again, Dr. Wala? The sound from your part.
I speak about the residue of pesticides. I speak, Dr. Hussein. You hear me?
Yeah, now it's better. I hear you better.
I speak about the residue of pesticides. I ask you about the organization about the residue of pesticides and heavy metal in Egyptian market.
Yes. Okay. Okay. The heavy metal in the Egyptian market, it's vary for the products. We have taken some samples from many type of food, whether was processed or was fresh, in order to know what is the situation. And we have found lead in some products. The main things which is we found was pesticide. Pesticide was more than the heavy metals. The heavy metals were in specific products, but was not as general as heavy metals. Some of our products for the pesticide were from 2% up to 98%. 98%. One of the commodity, which was almost 98% of pesticides, was Kimon in particular. And unfortunately, the produced locally and the imported, both of them were much contaminated with pesticide. We made very strong policies, and we've been able to make success in the imported Kimon, but on the market, the one locally produced still is under trial, has not been successfully achieved. And the onion in particular was the least one which has pesticide. We have a lot of information, and we are using this for risk-based, for dealing with different things. Another thing is, and I don't want to astonish you, but the lead in particular in the old legislation was 10% in the contact material, 10%. And also we are writing now technical regulation for the chemical and biochemical contaminant, and going to be on the Egyptian Gazette by June, inshallah.
Thank you, Dr. Hanan.
Thank you, Dr. Wala.
Dr. Hanan,
I'm getting a question from Sihan Sami. She's asking about the new valley. Is it available to move the fish portion according to the lack of water resources? What are the efforts given to make sure enough water is available for fish and water? What are the efforts given for this?
طيب شكرا دكتورة. أنا شايف دلوقتي في there is a question about the الوادي الجديد, New Valley, where there is a lack of fisheries due to the lack of water. What is the efforts available to make available the water and to increase the fishery production in the New Valley? I would like to look at the possibility actually of the priority of each project in each area. We don't have to produce everything in everywhere. What is the area suitable for fish production on the map? We can allocate it, but not necessarily that the fish production is important to have it everywhere. But in the New Valley, there are irrigation plans, and in the irrigation plans, we can have ponds of water or small reservoirs that will make available the water for irrigation. And we can actually cultivate aquaculture in these reservoirs before using it in irrigation. And therefore, we are not consuming water, but we are only utilizing the irrigation water for fish production. And we all know that fish does not consume water. It consumes a very little amount of water, but it lives in water. Thank you.
Thank you so much for this short, accurate, and thorough answer. And we still have 1 minute left, so I will need to thank our speakers for today's session, Professor Dr. Farid Abu Hadid and Professor Dr. Hussein Mansour, who joined us today for this interesting session. And also I need to thank Dr. Wala Said, my colleague who joined me today as a chairperson for this session. And I would like also to thank Dr. Muhammad Abu Zaid, who was entitled of organizing the sessions for the basic science sector. I would like also to thank all the audience for being with us. And I'm sure that this was a very interesting session. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Hanan. Thank you very much, Dr. Wala and Dr. Hussein Mansour, and for all participants. I'm really proud that this session have about 600 participants listening to us. I hope that we make something useful for them. Thank you very much.
Thank you. And this is the way it goes when the speakers are celebrities and famous and also interesting to listen to their presentations. Thank you so much. Thank you. Enjoy your stay at the conference. Thank you.
Thanks for all of you, and happy Ramadan, inshallah, is coming in a few days. And I wish very safe food for all Egyptian and for our export as well.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Bye-bye.
دكتور احمد صباح الخير.
صباح النور.
مع حضرتك عبد الرحمن من ايريس يا دكتور.
اهلا وسهلا يا فندم.
اهلا بحضرتك يا دكتور. احنا يا دكتور احنا ان شاء الله في براكتس سيشن وهيبدا الساعه 11:30 شارب ان شاء الله.
تمام باذن الله.
تمام، احنا ممكن نقدر نجرب برزنتيشن دلوقتي عشان نتاكد ان هي شغاله.
تمام حاضر، ادي حضرتك بس دقيقه واحده كده.
تمام يا دكتور، براحه حضرتك خالص.
دكتور محمد دكتور محمد دكتور محمد، حضرتك سامعني؟ انا شايفك.
دكتور احمد عزت صباح الخير.
صباح الخير.
صباح الخير يا دكتور،
السلام
مع حضرتك
عليكم.
عبد الرحمن من ايريس.
اهلا وسهلا.
اهلا بحضرتك يا دكتور. دكتور احنا في براكتس سيشن ان شاء الله هنبدا الساعه 11:30 شارب ان شاء الله.
تمام.
تمام يا دكتور.
انا شايف الدكتور محمد.
تمام يا دكتور، احنا شايفين برزنتيشن دكتور احمد.
تمام خلاص تمام ان شاء
ممكن
الله
نعمل
يعني.
فول سكرين ان شاء الله.
تمام خلاص ان شاء الله يعني في الموعد باذن الله.
تمام يا دكتور، شكرا لحضرتك.
تمام كل حاجه تمام. صباح الخير على حضراتكم جميعا.
صباح الخير. يعني احنا خلاص هنخرج دلوقتي ونرجع الساعه 11:30.
تمام. ازي حضرتك دكتور عبد الرحمن؟
دكتور احمد ازيك، عامل ايه؟
حضرتك يا دكتور. اهلا وسهلا دكتور محمد.
اهلا بيك يا حبيبي، منور.
ده نور حضرتك، شكرا يا فندم.
اشكرك.
دكتور محمد
اتفضل يا فندم. اتفضل يا فندم.
في اي انستراكشنز او تعليمات او اي ازاي السيشن يعني حتى حساب مانجمنت، طبعا الترتيب هيكون الدكتور احمد سلمان الاول،
مظبوط.
بعدين الدكتور مصطفى فوده، وبعدين الدكتور عمرو زاهر.
مظبوط يا فندم. والدكتور محمد سلامه هيدخل معانا، هو لسه كان قافل معايا من 5 دقائق. دكتور احمد
ايوه،
هو ممكن مثلا نمشي كده بالترتيب، هو ممكن يقدم الدكتور احمد، حضرتك دكتور مصطفى، وانا اخر واحد اقدم الدكتور
عمرو زاهر.
بالظبط كده.
هل هنقرا حاجه في البايوجرافي بتاعهم ولا بس
يا فندم
مجرد
حضرتك مشكورا. كل واحد هيتقدم هيتقال شورت نوت كده عن البايوجرافي بتاعه.
كويس، ولا الافيليشن بتاعه بس فقط هو موجود فين؟
لا يا دكتور، احنا امبارح حضرتك في التوكس قدمنا الناس بشورت بايوجرافي، يعني لا تتعدى دقيقه ونص بالكتير يعني.
خلاص اوكي.
ماشي يا فندم. ماشي يا فندم، نسعد بيك يا دكتور.
الله يخليك.
الله يبارك فيك يا دكتور.
دكتور محمد صباح الخير. دكتور بليز unmute yourself. مش سامعين حضرتك.
ايوه
تمام كده يا دكتور.
صباح الخير.
صباح الخير، ازي حضرتك؟ مع حضرتك عبد الرحمن من ايريس يا دكتور.
الحمد لله.
اهلا بك دكتور، احنا في براكتس سيشن وان شاء الله هنبدا الساعه 11:30.
بس الصوت بيقطع بس شويه.
حضرتك كده سامعني يا دكتور؟
طيب تمام ان شاء الله.
تمام يا دكتور.
سامعك كويس قوي، سامعك كويس.
تمام، شكرا لحضرتك يا دكتور.
الاستاذ عبد الرحمن.
تمام يا دكتور.
ماشي. ايوه. senior immunologist at Jenner Institute. University of Oxford. UK. تعالي عامل ميوت. ماشي.
طب انت مظبط عشان ما يبانش الاسئله
دكتور محمد صباح الخير. دكتور محمد حضرتك سامعني؟
سامعك يا فندم.
تمام يا دكتور، احنا بس في البراكتس سيشن وان شاء الله 5 دقائق بالظبط
طيب
وهنبدا.
انا بس عايز اقول لك على حاجه لسه واصله لي دلوقتي، ان الدكتور عمرو زاهر مش عارف يدخل باللينك اللي مبعوت له على الايفنت.
تمام يا دكتور، هنتواصل معاه دلوقتي حالا. حاضر.
اللي هو من جامعه زويل. تمام.
تمام يا دكتور، ماشي، شكرا حضرتك.
اشكرك.
العفو.
مع السلامه.
انا جالي تليفون ابعته لحضرتك ولا الدكتور اشرف؟
خلاص هو بيرهن هتواصل معاه. الولد قال لي لا خلاص. ادوني برضه اتكلم افهم ايه القصه يعني. اتفضل يا حبيبي.
بعت لحضرتك على الواتساب.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. كونتاكتس نيو عمرو زاهر سيف. اوكي.
دكتورز وي ار ريدي دلوقتي. ممكن هنبدا ان شاء الله فيديو دقيقتين، بعدها حضرتك كان بروسيد.
انا بس بعد اذنك انا برضو مش شايف الدكتور مصطفى فوده، مش
دكتور مصطفى احنا بنحاول نتواصل معاه، ودكتور عمرو برضه. دكتور عمرو خلاص بعتنا له البانلست لينك تاني، ودكتور مصطفى مش عارفين نوصل له لسه. تمام. فاحنا ممكن نبدا، ودكتور احمد موجود. بالظبط.
دكتور احمد موجود معانا.
تمام، فاحنا ممكن نبدا ان شاء الله نكون اتواصلنا معاه.
تمام. دكتور رفعت حضرتك متواجد مش كده يا فندم؟ طيب دكتور محمد سلامه.
ايوه دكتور محمد.
اهلا معالي النائب. احنا كده جاهزين يا فندم، فاضل بس الدكتور احمد رفعت، ما اعرفش هو كان معانا من شويه.
تمام يا دكتور ماشي، احنا ممكن هنبدا بالفيديو دلوقتي، بعدين
وادي الدكتور احمد سلمان اهوت. تمام.
حياتي لحضراتكم جميعا.
اهلا بيك يا فندم. دكتور محمد سلامه اتفضل يا فندم. اتفضل يا دكتور محمد.
تمام يا دكتور، هنبدا دلوقتي ان شاء الله.
توكلنا على الله.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. Our first presentation by Dr. Ahmed Salman, Senior Immunologist, General Institute, University of Oxford, United Kingdom. The title of the presentation.
دكتور محمد استاذن سيادتك يا فندم، هم بيعرضوا فيديو دلوقتي للمؤتمر، لما يخلص حضرتك معلش هتعمل البرزنتيشن تاني. اعتذر يا فندم.
نقدر نبدا دلوقتي يا دكتور ان شاء الله.
اهلا وسهلا بحضراتكم جميعا، وبرحب بجميع الحاضرين، وبترك الكلمه للاستاذ الدكتور محمد سيد سلامه معالي النائب. اتفضل يا فندم.
Our first presentation is by Dr. Ahmed Salman, Senior Immunologist at Jenner Institute, University of Oxford, United Kingdom. The title of the presentation is Updates on COVID-19 Vaccines and the Lessons Learned. تفضل دكتور أحمد.
شكرا جزيلا دكتور. ويعني سعادة كبيرة جدا وشرف كبير ان انا اكون متواجد مع حضراتكم النهارده. فبسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. يعني I will share the slides so we can start. Just would like to confirm before I start if slides are possible to see now.
تمام يا دكتور.
Great, thank you. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Thanks too much for Dr. Saeed and for all of you and the organizers. It's a great pleasure and honor to feel back home and to be invited to give a talk in this great conference for Ain Shams University. I'm Ahmed Salman, graduated from Biochemistry Department in Ain Shams University. So feeling back home giving this talk. Now I'm based at the Jenner Institute at the University of Oxford. And I'm working mainly in vaccine development. And of course, these days, the only vaccine people will care about is vaccine for COVID-19. So my talk will be more not just presenting the data, it will be more presenting the experience itself, how you can really have this development, design, and testing a vaccine and even get it licensed in a record time within just less than a year. That's actually a revolutionary record for vaccine developments, which used to be taking few years, if not decades, in normal situations. So we based here at the Jenner Institute, which is part of the University of Oxford. It's kind of a modern building, but we still have this old style and historical place or style for the University of Oxford. And although it looks like that style, old style, but it has all the cutting edge technologies for any field of research. And we are lucky to have this facilities for vaccine developments. Our institute named based the physician, English physician, Edward Jenner, who discovered the modern vaccine field or vaccination fields. And basically he made the first kind of clinical challenge experiment for a vaccine by discovering that or observing that the milkmaid who exposed to the cow smallpox, they don't develop the human, the lethal smallpox. And then he had this link that maybe there's a way to induce something that can protect you from the natural infection. There were, of course, some ways to deal with the immune system in old or ancient civilization like Egyptian and Chinese, but there were no clear understanding how you can really induce it artificially. So he did that artificially, and that was the start of the vaccination development in the 18th century. The smallpox was a really bad disease that can kill millions of people, and in the last decade, it kills nearly 50 million person till it's solely by vaccine developments has been eradicated, and that's announced officially by the WHO in 1980. So the vaccines are a very powerful medical intervention, especially in case of pandemic as what we have now. So all the attention we're relying these days in developing an efficient and high immunogenic and safe vaccine that can hopefully take us out of this pandemic. So vaccines mainly inducing the immune system artificially, and that's relying on a protein structure. Of course, now there's different technologies, but they all will aim to end up showing a protein structure that can be exposed to the immune system and stimulated to generate a long-term memory that can respond faster and stronger when we expose to the real natural infection. I would not go through this slide too much. I just would focus in two types of cells of our immune system, which is the T cells and the B cells, which we mainly induce, or we aim to induce them when we design a vaccine, which is the B cells and the T cells, because both cells are the only cells in our immune system that can develop a memory. So if we manage to generate or induce a good immune system, and these cells turn to a memory cells, they can last for a long time, so then they can give a better protection when we expose to the natural cause of disease. So when we design a vaccine, we have to consider the following points, and it's really matter to consider them all, but there's one of them that you really will not negotiate about, which is the safety of the vaccine. Efficacy can be acceptable if you pass the border of 50%, and of course, the higher the efficacy, the better. And also you aim for having a long-term lasting immunity, but this is not always the case. And of course, maybe the most famous example is the flu vaccines, for maybe two reasons, either based on the immune system or based on the pathogens mutations as example, but the longer the immunity, that's of course the better, and you aim for that when you design a vaccine. The third important point is that you aim mainly for inducing both the humoral and the cell-mediated immunity, and the humoral based on the B cells, and the antibody and the cell-mediated are mainly T cells-based immunity. But most of the licensed vaccines so far are based on humoral or B cells and antibodies immunity, but recently there were better understanding for the T cells, so we aim for that as well. And of course, you try to make sure that this vaccine will not induce any severe side effects. Of course, there's always will be a side effects, but that's need to be mild and not passing the moderate in most of the cases. So you need to consider that, and you're not ending up with having any severe symptoms or side effects. And very importantly, during pandemic like now, you need to make the vaccine easy to produce, easy to store and distribute, and of course, make it also inexpensive, so it can reach more people. Now, we're dealing these days with the SARS-CoV-2 virus causing the COVID-19 disease, and it's an RNA virus, which of course have a higher rate of mutation compared to the other viruses. But again, we are lucky. It's not as the flu viruses that mutate quite fast. And we care more about, there's more than 11 genes in this virus, but we care mainly for most of the vaccine design or developments on the spike glycoprotein, which is easily exposed to the immune system. It's a huge protein. It's over 1,275 amino acids, and it's full of inducing epitopes to the immune system that we can rely on them to design the vaccines and to have an efficient and strong protection. So the SARS-CoV-2 virus, not just affecting the respiratory system, of course, affecting nearly all the organs in our body if they manage to reach two, because they identify their target cell or host cells based on the ACE2 receptors or angiotensin converting enzyme E receptors, which are able to control the amount of water in our cells, which is mainly concentrated in organs doing this job as the lung, the intestine, and the kidney, but still every cell in our body have to deal with controlling the water inside the cells. So this is why we can see clearly now, after better understanding of this virus, it can reach and have damage to any organ they can reach to, including the brain, the lung, the kidney, the vascular system, and the heart and liver, or any other organs. Mainly, of course, the infection roots start by the lung, because this is the open organs to the environments or the external environment. And it's easier for the virus, of course, to infect people through the respiratory system, but still they can affect other organs. Now, developing vaccines, it's a long and laborious process. And unfortunately, this process, most of the time, will be wasted just to secure funding and taking paperwork. So we can see a clear example these days when we have all the facilities and all the funding required for developing this process, and having all the pieces come together from regulatories, from funders, from manufacturers as industries, this process can highly speed it to less than a year, which used to be in normal situation can be nearly 15 years. Now, that's the standard case, especially with some diseases that affect the poor countries or there's no good funding dedicated for them. My main work before the pandemic, it used to be on malaria. And sadly, malaria are in Africa and the poor countries and the Far East and the Latin America. And we really struggle and have big gaps between every single step to move from one phase to another, although we can show a great results, but of course, I'm speaking to academic and they know raising the funding, publishing the papers, getting the authorization from the regulators, that takes months, if not years, in normal situation. The fastest vaccine in history was the mumps vaccine, and that took nearly 4 years to be developed. But now we managed to do that in nearly 9 months to 12 months. And that's not by compromising any process related to the safety or the scientific experiment, but by overlapping steps and relying in a long-term experience in this field, and also doing prepared or some arrangement in advance. What we call it here as example, in 2016, we launched a project, we call it Pandemic X or Disease X program. So we tried by that time after the Ebola to develop a platform and a scheme that we can just initiate it once there's a pandemic happening in the future. So we don't wait till we start arranging things, asking for funding or advertising for asking for volunteers. So since that time, we had some volunteers database, nearly 100,000 volunteers already scanned, already in our database. We're ready to recruit them to start immediately at clinical trials when it's needed. There were some arrangement with the funders and the governments and the regulatories and industries and big pharma companies. And we agree with them in a certain platform that we can use if necessary, if there's a pandemic happening in the future. And we can see this clearly translated to developing nearly 100 vaccines now in clinical trials within less than a year from the pandemic. And 8 of them now having emergency approval are in use. And we nearly passed the 700 million dose have been administrated in people worldwide. So that's a really record for the vaccine developments. We work here in different technologies for vaccine developments, but you try to judge the case based on the situation. Maybe the most famous technologies are, of course, using the whole or attenuated virus, or relying in genetic materials like DNA or mRNA, which is more famous these days, or viral vector vaccine, which is using another harmful virus, and we use it as a vector to deliver a genetic materials that can be expressed to induce the immune system, to a protein that can induce the immune system, or the last technology or the fourth technology is relying in protein-based, either as a recombinant protein or empty capsid or virus-like particles. So by the time of the pandemic, you not just care about generating a highly efficient vaccines, you need also to consider what we call it vaccine impact, not just the vaccine efficacy. It is, of course, very important to have a highly effective vaccines that give you 90% or nearly 90% protection. But if that vaccine is very expensive, hard to produce, will not reach a large population, and you cannot manufacture it in a large scale, then that will be not very helpful, especially during the pandemic. So we consider something, we call it the vaccine impact. And that's considering these factors: the supply, the reach, the take up, and of course, considering the efficacy and the safety. And then you can really make a difference to control the pandemic. So we rely in using the viral vector vaccine because it's having the advantage in all these parameters. It's very cheap, easy to store. And of course, maybe you are aware about cost of vaccine like AstraZeneca, Oxford vaccine. It's nearly less than $3 per dose, comparing to the, even using the same technology or other technologies could vary from $10 at least per dose up to $60 per dose. So it's very efficient, and you can store it and transfer it and at room temperature, and very easy logistics. Using this technology, it has been used for nearly 20 years ago for not just vaccine development, for also developing immunotherapy and cancer gene therapy as well. And it's very safe. We have been using it for a long time, and not just here. As I mentioned, there's some licensed vaccine, and it's in use also for treating some diseases. So that makes things goes quite fast from the beginning of the pandemic, when it started in December. And once the genetic structure has been published in early January, we started here in Oxford designing the vaccine. We are lucky to have in Oxford a manufacturing facility, of course, for a small scale, for like just 1,000 doses, but that's allow us to easily start clinical trials in human, because we can manufacture vaccines with the human quality. And by early or late April, we started already the clinical trials with less than four months from designing our vaccines, and that was a record. Following that, we had the partnership with AstraZeneca in April, and we started by end of May the phase 3 clinical trials, or phase 2, phase 3 overlapped these results based on the results from phase 1 clinical trials, and that was in UK and Brazil and South Africa. And we run it as well in parallel by July in USA and Japan and Kenya and Peru and Chile. So of course, people follow maybe the news, so I'm not going to go too much through the details about the results, because as I mentioned, I'm focusing more on the experience of how you can respond fast to the pandemic. So by end of July, which is 7 months from starting the pandemic, we had some results showing the vaccine is safe, is effective, can induce a good immune response. And by the late of December, we had the results published officially for phase 3 from the clinical trials part that has been done in UK, Brazil, and South Africa, showing the vaccine efficacy in average nearly 70%. And we got the approval for the vaccine to be used outside of the clinical trials in human, inside UK by end of December, and we started to use it by the early of January 2021. Now, till today, we have Oxford AstraZeneca vaccine administered to more than 150 million person, and just inside UK, there's nearly 37 million person vaccinated till date. 21 million of them has been administered with Oxford AstraZeneca vaccine, including myself. And that shows a great improvement in controlling the pandemic compared to countries, even in Europe, that still going slow in their vaccines program. So we have now data from millions of people who took the vaccines, and we see that in real situations. So I would say 2 months ago, there were nearly 50 or 60,000 cases a day in UK and around 2,000 deaths from COVID. And today, we just celebrated maybe a week ago, there's 0 death in London, and we have not more than 1,000 to 2,000 cases a day, and nearly 10 to 40 deaths a day. So you can see a great impact of that. But in parallel, sadly, in other European countries, they suffer having a third wave. And in France and Germany, they started to have a new lockdown, and sadly, they have more than 50,000 cases a day, and also 1,000 or 2,000 cases death a day. Recently, we had also the result announced till it's published officially from the clinical trials part that has been done by AstraZeneca in USA, Chile, and Peru. And that's confirmed that we are having a good efficacy, around 76% in preventing the symptomatic or mild infection, and 100% preventing the severe infection or the need for hospitalization. And that was in 32,000 volunteers. And it's also induced a high efficacy, nearly 85% in elderly people from getting mild infection, and nearly 100% for death. And that's really what is more important, is not just the efficacy for preventing completely the infection, which is quite important, but what is more important is to avoid the pressure in the health systems, the need for hospitalization, and of course, more importantly, the death. So I would just through the example of we nearly every year, we should catch the flu, but we still can proceed with our daily life activities. And if we manage to turn the COVID to something near to that, I think that's a great success. Oxford vaccine, as I mentioned, it's relying on the viral vector vaccine, which is an adenovirus, and just simple other components for the saline solutions. And just to take some lessons or notes back home from this experience, which is, I would really love to have a similar experience. And what is more important is to learn from that hard and tough experience for the future, because of course, everyone will agree with me, that's not the first pandemic, and I don't think it will be the last pandemic or even the most serious pandemic in history. And since 2000, we nearly have 7 epidemic or pandemic happening, including, of course, swine flu, avian flu, the MERS, which is another COVID, or the SARS, or Zika virus, or Ebola. So it's happened more frequently now, and we need really to be prepared for the next pandemic and learn from this experience and to establish something similar in Egypt. And I can easily say if we dedicate the funding and we put all these points together, the scientists are always ready, and that's of course including myself, to turn that to a real ability to be a leading country in this type of research, which is could be a national security matter, because it's very important to overcome a pandemic, because it's not only affecting our health, it's basically affect everything in our livelihood, and that's including, of course, our social life, our mental health, or just simple activities and economy, and it's very important to invest in that. I would stop at this point, and I would like to thank, of course, everyone, because this is a huge team working behind this in Oxford and now around the world we're dealing with, and I would like to thank you all for your attention. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Ahmed.
Thank you very much.
دكتور محمد، اتفضل دكتور محمد.
أشكرك دكتور أحمد للبرزنتيشن الجميلة ديت والمعلومات اللي أنا نفسي يعني خدتها برضو عن أنواع الفاكسينز المختلفة والاتجاهات اللي ماشية دلوقتي بره. بس أنا كنت عايز أسألك سؤال يعني لو تسمح لي على الميث والفاكتس فيما يخص الأسترازينيكا المثار دلوقتي في بعض الدول اللي بره، بالذات في الاسكندنافيانز وفي بعض دول اوروبا، وابتدت كمان انجلترا ابتدت تعمل، يعني النهارده لسه سامع تقرير في CNN على ان انجلترا سجلت 79 حاله، منها 19 حاله وفاه بسبب الجلطات اللي بتنشا نتيجه الفاكسينيشن بالاسترازينيكا، وال60 التانيين تحت يعني التشيك اب علشان يشوفوا القصه دي ماشيه ازاي. كنت عايز اعرف يعني القصه دي يعني هل هتنتهي على ايه، وايه هي الاكسبكتيشنز اللي طالعه من اللقاح دوت، لان ابتدت برضو بعض الناس اللي بتطعم هنا ابتدت تخاف انها تاخد الاسترازينيكا، يعني ابتدت تكش نتيجه المعلومه دي. فكنت عايز اسمع لو انت عندك اي انفورميشنز تخص القصه دي.
تمام، طبعا دي نقطه مهمه جدا، ويعني في كذا مصدر للمعلومه، لكن الحاجات اللي بتعتمد على الدلائل العلميه او النتائج اللي موجوده حاليا based on the clinical trials results we didn't see any يعني related to clots or blood clots او اي تجلطات في الناس اللي تم عليهم الاختبارات في التجارب السريريه، وده طبعا بيبقى تحت ملاحظه شديده جدا. ده كان حوالي 60,000 متطوع. كما حضرتك ذكرت دلوقتي بقى في استخدام للقاح على نطاق واسع. مع ذلك كل هذه الأعداد من الناس اللي للأسف ظهرت عليهم أعراض مصاحبة لجلطات معينة كلها ما زالت في رينج المتوقع في الوضع الطبيعي من غير التطعيمات. الحاجة الوحيدة اللي ممكن بيعتمدوا عليها إن هو كإجراء احتياطي إن أنت تبتدي تحط شوية قيود لحد ما تتأكد هل فعلا اللقاح هو سبب هذه الجلطات أم لا، لأنه حتى الآن كلها يعني تحت الدراسة، ما فيش أي تصريح رسمي سواء من يعني منظمة الصحة العالمية أو وكالة الأدوية الأوروبية أو يعني مثلا الهيئة الرقابية هنا في إنجلترا إن هي بتؤكد إنه اللقاح هو المسؤول عن ذلك. هو شايف إن هو في أعداد موجودة في لقاح أسترازينيكا الناس اللي أخذوه ظهر عليهم هذه الجلطات، ومقارنة باللقاحات الأخرى برضو ظهر فيها بعض الحالات، ولكن هتلاقي برضو في تفاوت مثلا داخل إنجلترا لأنه طعم كل الفئات ابتداء من الناس الأكبر، فعدد الحالات اللي ظهرت مثلا ليها علاقة بالتجلطات، هذا النوع من التجلطات تحديدا اللي هو بيبقى في المخ بيبقى أقل في كبار السن، فكان تقريبا نسبة حدوث ذلك يعني 1 أو 2 من كل مليون. يعني كما حضرتك ذكرت إنه حوالي 70 حالة من حوالي 21 مليون شخص أخذوا داخل إنجلترا. ده بيخلي الرينج ده ما زال طبقا للإحصائيات المعروفة التجلطات المشابهة ما زالت في الرينج اللي هو الطبيعي اللي بيحدث تقريبا 5 من كل مليون في كبار السن لما فوق 60 سنة، وتقريبا 10 ل 20 من كل مليون في من هم أقل من 60 سنة، فما زال في الرينج المقبول. حصل شيء مشابه في ألمانيا. في ألمانيا مثلا أول ما بدأوا يستخدموا اللقاح صرحوا باستخدامه للفئات العمرية اللي أقل من 55، وبالتالي ظهر عندهم حوالي أعتقد 25 أو 26 حالة تجلطات من 3 مليون. فكانت نسبة حالات التجلطات أكثر، ولكن كان شيء برضه متوقع إن هو يكون أكثر في الناس اللي أقل من 55 سنة. حتى الآن لا يوجد أي دليل قاطع بيثبت إنه اللقاح مسؤول عن ذلك. في حالات حدثت بالفعل من التجلطات نتج عنها وفيات ما زالت في معدل المقبول، ولكن لم يتم إثبات أن اللقاح مسؤول عنها. طبعا على التوازي لابد من يعني القيام بالتحريات والإجراءات الرقابية حتى يتم يعني حسم هذا الأمر، ولكن المهم إن هو على أسوأ الاحتمالات لو فعلا ثبت أن اللقاح بيتسبب في هذا العرض، على أسوأ الاحتمالات اللي هو لم يثبت حتى الآن، ما زال الرقم إن هو 1 من كل 600,000 يظهر عليه أعراض قد تكون خطيرة من لقاح. ده شيء مقبول جدا جدا لما بتعمل الريسك اسسمنت أو ريسك بنفيت اسسمنت، لأنه ما فيش أي دواء أو عقار أو لقاح ليس له أعراض جانبية. يعني الباراسيتامول مثلا اللي هو اوف شيلف يعني دراج مش محتاج ان انت تشتريه مثلا بروشيتا، بيتسبب في فشل كلوي 1 من كل تقريبا 500,000. حاجه زي البنسلين عندك 10% من الناس مثلا عندهم حساسيه ضده، يتوفى من الناس اللي عندهم حساسيه لو اخذوا البنسلين 14%، ومع ذلك بنستخدمه. لكن اللي على ارض الواقع دلوقتي هو البنفيتس اللي موجوده خصوصا في كبار السن، ولذلك كل الدول تقريبا اللي حطت ريستريكشنز ما زالت بتستخدمه على كبار السن، لانه الاصابه بالكوفيد 1 من كل 8 بيتوفوا في الناس اللي فوق 70 سنه. يعني عندك 8 اصيبوا من اللي فوق 70 سنه، 1 بيتوفى منهم. وبالتالي لو عندك هتقارنه بريسك انه 1 من كل 600,000 من كبار السن، او 1 أو 2 من كل مليون ممكن يبقى في فرصه ان هو تجيله امراض او يعني ليها اعراض شديده، فده برضه هيفضل ريسك مقبول. الحاجه اللي فيها دلوقتي الكلام ان هو الريسك اقل بكثير، ان هو في حاله الاصابه بالكوفيد 1 من كل 1000 لمن هم اقل من ال30 بيحدث فيها وفاه، وبالتالي ممكن نستخدم اوبشنز ثانيه، خصوصا اذا كان في رفاهيه الاختيار في الدول اللي عندها لقاحات اخرى، وده اللي اتصرح به هنا في انجلترا حتى يتم حسم هذا الموضوع.
اشكرك يا فندم. دكتور احمد رفعت، اتفضل يا فندم. دكتور احمد،
حضرتك ميوت دكتور احمد. لو
دكتور احمد رفعت عزت، اتفضل يا فندم، اتفضل.
دكتور احمد، اشكر حضرتك جدا على البرزنتيشن دي. انا ليا كم سؤال سريع كده. يعني بعد 115 or 120 million people who actually administered the vaccine, you are not able up till now to come up with a causative relation or correlation between the clots and the vaccine. This is something a little surprising. في نقطة تانية كمان مهمة جدا، يعني أنا مش قادر أفهمها، إن الريبورتس اللي بتيجي مع الكلوتس بتقول إن بيبقى فيه deficiency في البلاد بليتلتس في البيشنتس. المفروض يحصل العكس حسب ما أنا فاهم. يعني إزاي يكون الموضوع ده؟ الحاجة الثانية، هل حضرتك بتنصح بإن الناس اللي أخذوا أو بياخدوا الأسترازينيكا ياخدوا معاه أنتي كواجولينتس في نفس الوقت، ولا ده غير مطلوب وخصوصا في كبار السن؟ دي بعض التساؤلات. السؤال الثاني يعني السريع برضو، حضرتك اتكلمت على الهيومرال اميونيتي. السيل ميديتد، اعتقد ان الوقت كافي جدا ان يحصل لها اسسمنت ولو حتى بريليمينري اسسمنت، ففي اي ابديتس عليها لغايه دلوقتي من الريزلتس بتاعتكم؟ متشكر جدا.
تمام. انا ممكن ابدا باخر سؤال سيادتك. طبعا احنا بنعمل اسسمنت للتي سيلز ريسبوند وبنشوف الاستجابه، ولكن دايما التي سيلز بتبقى الريسبوند بتاعها لوحده مش كفايه، بيبقى مهم جدا ان هو يكون برضه في انجين برزنتيشنز. يعني لو اللقاح بتاعي مثلا او الاستجابه المناعيه بالتي سيلز عاليه، ولكن الانجين بريزنتنج سيلز مش بتعمل برزنتيشن للإيبيتوبس اللي يعني هو ماتش ذا تي سيلز، مش هيبقى عندي اي فايده من التي سيلز اللي موجوده دي. فبيبقى التقييم اصعب شويه، ولكن طبعا بتطلع بنوع من انواع يعني الريدنجز بناء على لو عندك سترونج تي سيلز اميون ريسبونس. بس برضه بيبقى مهم ان انت تشوف هل فعلا الإيبيتوب بتاعك بيحصل له برزنتيشن.
بدون مقاطعة حضرتك، لكن هل في ايفالويشن للسايتوكسيك سيلز مثلا مباشرة او الناتشرال كيلرز السي دي 8 اكتيفيتي السايتوتوكسيك سيلز بالذات، يعني هل في ايفالويشن ليها؟
اكيد يعني هو حتى من مزايا الفيرال فيكتور فاكسين ان هو بيحفز الاندوجينس برزنتيشن باثوي اللي هو بيحفز السي دي 8 او السايتوتوكسيك تي سيلز، وفي نفس الوقت بيحفز الاكسوجينس باثوي او برزنتيشن باثوي اللي هو بيعمل برزنتيشن على ام سي كلاس 2 وبيحفز الانتي بوديز. فبنقدر نقيس طبعا، وهو الابحاث اللي اتنشرت وضحت ان هو في استجابه تي سيلز قويه جدا بتظهر بعد حوالي من اسبوع لاسبوعين، والاجسام المضاده بتظهر استجابه قويه بتوصل البيك بتاعتها حوالي بعد 3 اسابيع من اخذ اللقاح. فده يعني موجود، لكن هو انا بس كان قصدي ان هو الاستجابه في حاله الانتي بوديز بتبقى اسهل كتير. انت بتبقى مجرد ان انت وصلت لتايتر معين خلاص انت بتبقى متاكد ان ده هيعادل الستاندرد دوز اوف مثلا فيروس لود لما الناس بتتعدي، فخلاص فبقى اسهل كتير في ان انت تقدر تحكم بناء فقط على الاميونوجينيسيتي او الاستجابه المناعيه هل اللقاح هيبقى فعال او لا. لكن التي سيلز لازم تعمل الافيكاسي او التشالنج بحيث ان انت تقدر تتاكد ان فعلا العاملين في استجابه التي سيلز سواء كتايتر او ريسبوند بلس البرزنتيشنز اللي بتحصل عشان تحفز التي سيلز. لكن ده طبعا منشور بناء على الامكانيات اللي موجوده بالستاندرد الموجوده لحد دلوقتي. النقطه الثانيه اللي حضرتك ذكرتها بخصوص العدد الكبير، طبعا في عدد كبير جدا موجود، وهو فكره انه الاجسام بيطلع في حاله الناس اللي جالهم تجلطات بيبقى في اجسام مضاده موجوده. الاجسام المضاده دي بترتبط بالبليتلتس او بصفائح الدم وبتخليها تتخثر، وبالتالي لما بتقدر تقيس كميه البليتلتس اللي موجوده في الدم بتلاقيها اقل نتيجه انها تجلطت او تجمعت في مكان تاني وما بقتش موجوده ان انت تقدر تقيسها. فهو ده فكره انه لما بتقيس البليتلتس بتلاقيها اقل في حالات هذه التجلطات. ووجدوا ان سبب هذه التجلطات في اغلب الحالات وليس كلها نتيجه اجسام مضاده فعلا بتنتج، ولكن هذه الاجسام المضاده it doesn't match اي تركيب او يعني لا تتعرف على اي تركيب في الفيروس، وبالتالي حتى الان صعب ان انت تربطها بالفيروس. يعني هو الاجسام المضاده موجوده في حالات ناس اخذوا استرازينيكا، وموجوده برضه في حالات تانية طبيعيه لم تاخذ لقاح استرازينيكا او اخذت لقاحات اخرى، ولكن وجد ان هي موجوده يعني بنسبه اكبر في استرازينيكا. هل ده سببها ان هو يعني النوع ده مثلا من الجلطات موجود في الناس اللي بتاخد الكونتراسبشنز او موانع الحمل الهرمونيه، بيبقى موجود فيها بنسبه كبيره جدا، تقريبا 5 من كل مليون سيده بتاخد موانع حمل ممكن بتصاب بهذا النوع من الجلطات ايضا. ففي عوامل كتير، ووجدوا طبعا ان هو لما حتى اثاروا نقطه ان هو طيب موجود فعلا نسبه هذه الجلطات في الفيميلز اكثر من الميلز، لا حوالي في 67% فيميلز او 50 حوالي فيميلز مقارنه بحوالي 20 ميل. لكن لقى برضو ان هو في نفس الوقت انت لما طعمت الاطقم الطبيه او الميديكال ريسيرشرز اغلبهم فيميلز، فده برضو خلى الحسم في هذا الموضوع يعني لحد حتى هذه اللحظه فعلا في اجسام مضاده، لكن it doesn't match any structure في الفيروس، وبالتالي انت مش قادر تجزم ان هو فعلا نتيجه تركيب مثلا بروتيني في اللقاح هو اللي بيثير هذا النوع من الاجسام المضاده وبالتالي بيسبب هذا النوع من الجلطات. لم يتم حسم ذلك. طبعا في اسباب تانية كما ذكرت ممكن تكون زي الكونتراسبشنز، ده شيء مرشح. الحاجه الثانيه الناتشرال انفكشنز، الناس اللي بتصاب بالكوفيد تقريبا برضو يعني نسبه 13% من الناس بيجي لهم جلطات في الاصابه بالناتشرال انفكشنز. فهل فعلا الناس ممكن اخذوا اللقاح ولكن اصيبوا بالفيروس فظهرت عندهم كده؟ كل دي تساؤلات لم يتم حسمها، ولكن يفضل سيادتك ان هو البنفيتس اعلى بكتير، وخصوصا في كبار السن، لذلك اللقاح بيتم استخدامه. النقطه الاخيره اللي سيادتك ذكرتها بخصوص اللي هي حاجه زي الاسبرين او الانتي بلاد كلوتينج دراجز، حتى اليوم لانه لم يتم الجزم بالرابط بين مسؤوليه اللقاح عن هذه الجلطات، وكاله الادويه الاوروبيه ما زالت لا تنصح باستخدام اي يعني ادويه مسيله للدم في حتى اليوم لحد ما يتم فعلا التاكد، لانه لو اتعرف السبب فعلا وتم ربطه بشيء معين او ميكانيزم معين في الفيروس هيبقى سهل جدا ان انت تقول ده من الاعراض النادره وما نستخدمش اللقاح في هذه الفئة مثلا، زي مثلا فايزر لا تستخدمه في الناس اللي عندهم حساسية مفرطة خصوصا ضد الليبيد نانو بارتيكلز لأنه هيعمل لهم مشاكل. فلحد أن نصل إلى هذه اللحظة ونبقى فعلا عارفين هيفضل يعني ويتم إصدار بعد كده توصيات بناء على فهم الموضوع، يعني اللقاح ما زال ينصح باستخدامه في كل الفئات، ده بناء على وكالة الأدوية الأوروبية ومنظمة الصحة العالمية، وحتى هنا في إنجلترا ما زال بينصح باستخدامه لكل الفئات إلا في حالة توفر لقاح آخر ينصح في يعني إعطاء الاختيار لمن هم دون ال30 إن هو ياخد اللقاح الآخر.
شكرا لحضرتك جدا.
شكرا سيادتك.
دكتور احمد اشكرك على الردود. في بعض الاسئله جت بس هنختم بيها بقى علشان نفتح التوك الثانيه. احد الاسئله بيقول يعني طالبه كاتبه ان انا اخذت اوريدي الكوفيد وخفيت منه، فهل انا محتاجه اطعم الفتره دي ولا اقدر انتظر؟
هي التوصيات ان هو تاخد على الاقل جرعه واحده ولكن بعد التعافي التام ب3 اشهر على الاقل، فتبقى الجرعه الاولى من اللقاح كانها جرعه تعزيزيه لان اوريدي هيبقى في مناعه نتيجه العدوى الطبيعيه.
السؤال الثاني كان في طالبه بتقول ان عدد الفاكسينز اللي مطروحه دلوقتي ابتدت تزيد، فبقى المتاح في الماركتينج اكتر من نوع، فهل في مقارنه حصلت ما بين الافكتفنس بتاعهم؟
طبعا يعني هو الافيكاسي ده فاكتور مهم جدا من اللي بتقارن بيه اللقاحات، ولكن يعني ممكن القول ان كل اللقاحات اللي اخذت اعتماد بعد طبعا استيفاء التجارب العلميه والمنهجيه ويعني تقييمها من المجتمع العلمي نتيجه نشر ابحاث والجهات الرقابيه كلها بمجرد توفرها ينصح ان هو يتم اخذها، لانه يعني طبعا الفعاليه بتتفاوت ممكن من 50-60% لحد ممكن 95%، ولكن الشيء المشترك بينهم كلهم ان هم بتقريبا نسبه 100% بيمنعوا الدخول في الاعراض الشديده والوفيات، وده شيء مهم جدا جدا يعني من انك تمنع العدوى من الاساس، لانه يعني كما ذكرت ان انت تصاب بالعدوى ولكن تقدر تمارس حياتك بصوره طبيعيه زي ما بيحصل في حاله الانفلونزا الموسميه، ده شيء مقبول جدا وكل اللقاحات بتشترك في هذه الميزه.
خالص شكري ليك على المحاضره الممتعه ديت، وبنشكرك جدا على البارتيسيبيشن معانا في السيكتور دوت.
شكرا جزيلا، كل الشرف ليا بوجودي مع حضراتكم وشكرا جزيلا على الفرصه.
شكرا يا فندم. دكتور احمد رفعت اتفضل يا فندم حضرتك علشان البرزنتيشن الثانيه، اتفضل.
حضرتك الدكتور مصطفى.
الو
ايوه الدكتور مصطفى فوده معانا؟
ايوه معاك معاك.
النكست سبيكر is Dr. Mustafa Foda. His current affiliation now is advisor to the Ministry of Environment for Biodiversity and National Focal Points. I'd like to give just a few short note on his biography. It's very long and impressive, combining academic and executive work. Dr. Mustafa got his PhD or obtained his PhD in marine biology from Bristol University in 1979, and he had the position of head of fisheries and marine science of Sultan Qaboos University in Oman, and director of the natural conservation and national focal points of several conventions. A very long list of jobs and posts. I think this is enough to introduce our speaker. We are ready to hear and listen to your valuable presentation.
Thank you very much. Do you hear me now?
Yes, of course, yes.
All right, so my presentation is quite completely different from the previous one on vaccines, although both of them are biodiversity. They are part of the whole biodiversity, which is a variation in animal and plants, starting from microbes to the largest animals like whales, whatever. So my presentation, to be precise, it will deal with how the whole issues of biodiversity conservation developed, starting with the Stockholm meeting in 1972 when the whole world met together under what we call human environment. At that time, there was issue of, shall we say, the pollution everywhere, acid rain and other things like that. But biodiversity did not take any site as such. However, in 1980, with the late Professor Muhammad Fatah Qassas, who at the time was the president of IUCN, produced a fantastic global strategy for biological diversity that helped to a great extent to join the Rio Conventions, that these are the climate change, biodiversity, and desertifications. So based on all of this, a lot of activities have been taken on based on what are the drivers of biodiversity loss, especially the habitat loss, overuse of resources, pollution, invasive species, and climate change, whatever. So these are the main topics that we will deal with within the time allowed for us. For those of you that they are not familiar with Biodiversity Convention, it has very clear 3 objectives. The first one is the conservation of biodiversity at large. Number 2, sustainable use of biodiversity. Number 3, access and benefit sharing from the use of genetic resources. These are the 3 major objectives. During that time, over the area of 1990s, many things happened, and we ended up by having what we call thematic biodiversity. That means you have agrobiodiversity, you have inland biodiversity, you have marine biodiversity, you have island biodiversity, etc. But at the same time, you have many cross-cutting issues among all of these different issues of biodiversity, like the protected areas, for example, like reporting, like assessment of resources, like the NBSAP, what you call it, National Biodiversity and Action Plan, whatever. In 1999, the whole world signed a very important protocol that deal with the biosafety. We call it GMOs, genetically modified organisms, especially those related to synthetic biology. But at the same time, after 10 years almost, we were able to negotiate for the Nagoya Protocol, which deal with the access and benefit sharing. Having said all of this, we set very clear target in 2002, which was reducing the significantly biodiversity loss.
دكتور مصطفى sorry
Yes.
for the interruption بس هو حضرتك عارض presentation ولا
انا عارض البرزنتيشن
طيب استاذن
ده
حضرتك بس عشان هي مش واضحه عندنا فاحنا ممكن نعمل شير سكرين
ما انا عملت شيرنج سكرين.
طيب استاذن حضرتك نقفل البرزنتيشن وبعديها ندوس شير سكرين ونختارها تاني.
ماشي انا هقفل البرزنتيشن دلوقتي وشيرنج سكرين. I thought اوكي
نفتح البرزنتيشن تاني then ندوس شير سكرين.
افتحها تاني.
تمام يا دكتور.
اوكي do you see it now؟
ممكن بقى ندوس شير سكرين ونختار البرزنتيشن. شير سكرين من الزوم الريد باتون من تحت.
ايوه مش ريد باتون اللي هو جرين.
جرين باتون. تمام
جرين باتون.
تمام يا دكتور.
do you see it now؟
لا يا دكتور لسه.
اجيب
احنا يا دكتور قفلنا البرزنتيشن.
نعم
تمام احنا قفلنا البرزنتيشن وفتحناها تاني زين هندوس شير سكرين بعدين نختار البرزنتيشن وندوس شير.
Do you see it now؟
تمام يا دكتور كده تمام.
طيب
ممكن نعمل فول سكرين يا دكتور وحضرتك كام تسيب؟
هعملها.
شكرا جدا يا دكتور.
شكرا. Okay. So I said that we have agreed on a very specific target to reduce biodiversity loss, significant biodiversity loss. However, for almost 10 years, we didn't know how to do it. And there were a lot of claims about the methodology, the baselines, whatever. So by 2010, we couldn't make it. So we ended up by having a strategy, a new strategy that was approved by in 2010 for 10 years. And it has very, very specific goals and 20 targets. These targets deal with many, many issues like the public awareness, like mainstreaming of biodiversity into different sectors, incentives, habitat loss, invasive species, protected areas, fisheries, ecosystem assessment, agriculture, marine biodiversity, Nagoya Protocol, traditional knowledge, scientific knowledge, and many, many other things as well related to the financing, whatever. So that was a remarkable and new improvement in a way that we have a well-defined strategy with clear action plans, and it ended up by having almost all countries that are part of the convention became or be able to make what you call NBSAP, National Biodiversity Strategy and Action Plan. However, after almost 10 years now, because that was until 2020, it turned up that the Global Biodiversity Outlook that was published very, very recently, it made it very clear we couldn't make it. That means that none of the Aichi targets were not fully achieved, although some targets were partially achieved, especially targets related to the protected areas, for example, preparation of NBSAPs, knowledge, and financing to a great extent. And that was a major setup, because this will in turn threaten the achievement of sustainable development. The situation became much worse because of the COVID-19 pandemic has already further highlighted the importance of the relationship between people and nature. That means that all what is said already about COVID-19, it is part of the biodiversity. People, because they have explored everywhere in the world, they have agitated all the species that they already exist, whether they are viruses or whatever, and that end up having invasive species to a great extent. For example, if you look at all the 20 targets, we reached the date, but certainly targets were not achieved. None of these targets were achieved. It's the one that I already mentioned to you. And at the same time, because SCBD, strategy, is linked to sustainable development goals. And as you could see, we still have another 10 years, but it is doubtful that we will be able to achieve it. For example, if you take for one issue like agriculture, what's happening in agriculture? Agriculture, it turned out that 80% of global deforestation are due to agriculture. At the same time, food system release almost 29% of global GHGs, global warming. At the same time, agriculture use 70% of the whole fresh water. And the main drivers of biodiversity loss, almost 70% are due to agriculture. And this, we are talking only about one issue, which is agriculture, which is one of among many, many, many issues. Drivers related to production cause 50% of freshwater biodiversity loss, especially amphibians and small ones. And certainly 50% of agricultural land have degraded all of this. Now, one of the main development that took part only about a year ago or 2 years ago is what you call global assessment of biodiversity and ecosystem service. This is under what you call IPBES, Intergovernmental Panel on Biodiversity and Ecosystem Service. This important report that came out and made it very clear we are far away from reaching what we have agreed upon in 2010. For example, most of the terrestrial environment, almost 75%, are severely altered due to human actions and at the same time, marine environment suffer almost by 66%. There are also 40% reduction global of ecosystem extent and conditions. Many of these habitats and ecosystems are being deteriorated to a great extent. The same time, the global per capita consumption of materials, about sustainable consumption and production, this increased by 15%. At the same time, 70% or almost now 85% of wetlands since 1700 until 2000, we have lost many of these wetlands. Well, I don't need to know to tell you the importance of wetlands in terms of production of fisheries, in terms of the purification of water, in terms of the mitigations of climate change, whatever. So we are suffering greatly to extent, not only at large in terms of ecosystem, but at the same time at the species level, their populations and varieties as well of animals and plants. These are figures, yeah, I don't have to go through all of them, but it shows you that we still know very little about our biodiversity. There is estimate that there exists something around 80 million species, but we know only 8 million of them, but most of them are actually insects. Hundreds of species are actually being now, almost 1 million species threatened with extinction, and 500,000 share the world estimated of 5 million species in fisheries. This is the same thing to specific species like amphibians. We lost almost 40%. Corals, almost 33%. Proportion of species threatened with extinction, almost 25%. So we are really suffering greatly from what is happening. The same applies for food and agriculture. 300% increase in food production since 1970. The same thing applied to the land area that have been seen a reduction in productivity due to land degradation, and the same thing for other issues like the carbon dioxide emission, sequestration, whatever. Also, when we look at oceans and fishing, we realize that almost a third of the whole world stock assessment already made it, they have reached unsustainable level, and almost 55% of the ocean area are covered by industrial fishing. That means that traditional fisheries are suffering greatly from all of this. It's not only oceans and fishing, but even mining and energy as well. Although mining does not represent 1%, but the industry itself has incredible negative impact on biodiversity, emission, water quality, whatever. These are the figures that already provided by IPBES. In addition to that, urbanization, development, and socioeconomic issues have already reached a situation where huge resources, we feel it, we are experiencing it, urbanization everywhere. Health is not only that proportion, 70% proportion of cancer drugs that are natural, synthetic, inspired by nature. Almost 4 billion people still rely on natural medicine. 17% of infectious diseases spread by animal vectors, like the situation of COVID-19, and so on. Climate change, we have very clear evidence that the global warming is real, is not debatable anymore, and the increase by 2 degrees could be even much worse than we have expected. 1 degree or 1 point is needed to a great extent. This is one of the major development that took place, and it's warning us to a great extent. So what can we do? When we met in Sharm el-Sheikh in 2018, the conference of the party have already requested the establishment of a working group to prepare what we call post-2020. It's called F, Global Biodiversity Framework. That means that we have to prepare a new vision that goes with the vision of 2050. That means that all biodiversity are valued, conserved, and restored, and wisely used, and maintain their services, sustaining a healthy, balanced, and delivering benefit. We have clear goals At the same time, we spread it into 3 major times zone. That means that we have a clear mission now on 2030. This is being drafted. It's not yet approved. A lot of work have been done. We have met twice, one in Kenya, one in Italy, and we were supposed to meet in Colombia to finish the whole framework, but certainly due to the COVID-19, we couldn't make it. So most of our work now are done online, which is not an easy subject. So at least the available draft that deal with major goals, the first one, reduce threats to biodiversity, that deal with the protected areas. We are talking about protected areas need to be increased by 30%. This is not an easy, because the previous strategy called for 17% on terrestrial land and 10% on the marine. But we don't know yet how we are going to respond to all of this, because that will need major political will to a great extent. So these are the draft target that already available for discussion and approval. And we hope by when we go to COP15, that will be to take place on Cannes in China in October this year. Hopefully that it will be a physical meeting, otherwise it will be a problem to a great extent. So these are the targets that already dealing with many issues, whether sustainable resources, invasive species, pollution control, increased contribution to climate change, but at the same time, another important goal that deal with the needs of people through sustainable use and benefit sharing. So we have other well-defined targets that now to deal with benefits of genetic resources, especially for food security and livelihood, as well as many other issues related to the management of ecosystem to a great extent. The other important goal as well is not only that you reduce biodiversity loss and at the same time to enhance them, but you have to find tools and solutions for implementation and mainstreaming. That was a major issue that will not take place during 2010 preparation of the strategy. The new one will hopefully be approved this year, deal with many issues about integration biodiversity value into policies, regulation, etc., achieving at least 50% of negative impact of biodiversity, and many other issues like that. When we look at the ideal situation, and based on the recently report of the Living Planet that was published in 2020, you have here, I don't know whether it's clear, this is the historical aspect, and this is where we are in 1970, and where are we now in 2010. If we do that, business as usual, we go down, where we lose most of all of our biodiversity. If we make an effort, that means that we increase the conservation efforts, so we'll reach a situation where we hopefully by 2050 will be able to reduce biodiversity loss, and we go back where we can live in harmony with nature to a great extent. Thank you very much. I hope I didn't take much time because I was giving only 15 minutes. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much, Dr. Mustafa Fouda. And now the subject is open for discussion and for questions. Do we have any questions? Dr. Mustafa?
Aywa? Hello?
I don't see that there are many questions, so if you don't mind, I have a couple of them, if you don't mind. One of them is the COVID-19 relationship between humans, and it was a misconduct between humans and nature. To study the wildlife and to put plans for conservation, wildlife conservation, you need to deal with the wild animals. And wild animals, as we know, they are like a reservoir of several potentially harmful pathogens. How do we overcome this dilemma? How do we overcome that controversy? How do we deal with them? How do we study them? In the meantime, we are not a cause of transmitting what they carry of the pathogens to the human race, human population, ending up with pandemics as the case was in COVID-19.
Well, thank you very much for this very interesting question. I would like to affirm that several workshops that already took place in recent months, and these were organized by several international organizations like IPBES and CBD about the human health. And then we developed what we call One Health approach. One Health approach is not dealing with the issue of human health in terms of disease, in terms of traditional medicine, whatever. No, it is a balance between the ecosystem itself and biodiversity at large, including human beings and all animals. And there are principles for all of that. And the World Health Organization already started implementing this One Health approach to be able to live in harmony with nature. And a lot of work already has been done. And as I said earlier, that we are the one who caused COVID-19, simply because we have disturbed the ecosystem. We don't need to do that. We have to live all nature, especially microorganisms, in their own places without agitating them. This is the best way how to do it. So One Health approach is the one that proposed to us, and the CBD already is implementing this together with WHO and other organizations.
How do we disseminate the awareness of this subject? It's very critical and sensitive subject that needs a lot of awareness and real plans, international plans to deal with it.
Awareness is a very tricky issue. In one hand, there was some time when we used to say, are you aware of protected areas, for example? I mean, 20 years ago, if you talk to people on the street about Ras Muhammad and other places like the Wadi Rayyan, whatever, people didn't know. But now, if you look at the schools curricula, there are a lot of information about the ecosystem, especially in primary school. They talk about ecosystem, they talk about invasive species, they talk about protected areas, whatever. But I agree with you that there is a need to develop well-defined indicators for awareness. One of the indicators, there is a global indicator that you start with a survey trying to know the perception of people about the issue of awareness, and then you examine it, and then you develop a program to increase awareness. It's not only to be aware about the issue of the biodiversity, but the most important thing is how to change your attitude. How can you feel that biodiversity is not the responsibility of the Ministry of Environment, but the responsibility of everyone? That means that you ask people to take share of that responsibility by not to deteriorating or destroying habitats or behaving very badly, whatever. This is the way how the world are going on, and a lot of interesting results that came out of that. We have, even at Ain Shams University, I know a case that they are doing a PhD on that issue of awareness, and a PhD that will come very, very soon. So there is an indicator, but we need a lot of resources to implement it.
Well, thank you very much. I think since we don't have any more questions, we can move on to the third presentation. Dr. Muhammad Muntasir.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Dr. Muhammad.
دكتور فودة على البرزنتيشن وعلى المعلومات اللي حضرتك قدمتها لنا في التوك بتاعتك. ان شاء الله دلوقتي our last speech ان شاء الله مع بروفيسور عمرو زاهر. Professor Amr Zahir, Center for Fundamental Physics, Zuhaili University. Briefly, Professor Amr Zahir graduated في 89 من جامعة اسكندرية، 92 من MIT, Massachusetts Institute of Technology، و94 البي اتش دي بتاعته برضه من نفس الام اي تي الماساتشوستس انستيتيوت اوف تكنولوجي. الكارير بتاع الدكتور عمرو ببساطه ابتدى في 99 وانتهى في سنه 2014 by joining the Center for Fundamental Physics في جامعه زويل. الريسيرش توبيك للبروفيسور عمرو زاهر بيعتمد mainly على الديفلوبينج للفيزيكال concepts والماثيماتيكال مودلز الابليكابل في الديزاين اند اناليسيز اوف نيوكلير رياكتور كورز ونيوكلير فيول سايكلز. طبعا الدكتور عمرو يعني عضو في حاجات كتير، اهمها على الاطلاق الامريكان نيوكلير سوسايتي والامريكان فيزيكال سوسايتي، بالاضافه ان هو الديبيوتي تيم ليدر للايجيبشن نتورك فور هاي انرجي فيزيكس، بالاضافه لحصوله على العديد من الجوائز. ده بريفلي يعني انا حبيت بس اقدم الدكتور عمرو زاهر، وهسيب له الفرصه ان هو دلوقتي يقدم لنا التوك بتاعته. اتفضل يا دكتور عمرو.
بس انا معانا حد ما جاش يشتغل لان هو بيقول عنده مشكله في البث.
دكتور عمرو حضرتك سامعني؟ دكتور عمرو حضرتك سامعني؟ دكتور عمرو حضرتك سامعني؟
دكتور عمرو اتفضل. دكتور عمرو حضرتك سامعنا؟ دكتور عمرو اتفضل.
احنا بنتواصل مع الدكتور عمرو دلوقتي يا دكتور.
الدكتور احمد، هو الدكتور عمرو في حاجه في الكونكشن عنده، لان الصوت اللي موجود ده صوت اللي بيتابع معانا من ايرس، فانا مش عارف المشكله ايه عنده. واضح ان هو مش قادر يعني يدخل معانا في الايفنت دوت.
حضرتك عبد الرحمن من ايرس يا دكتور، احنا بنتواصل مع الدكتور دلوقتي ونكلمه وان شاء الله يدخل.
طيب كون شاكر ليك.
العفو، شكرا. دكتور عمرو حضرتك سامعني؟
ايوه
دكتور عمرو، هو حضرتك فاتح الزوم من الموبايل واللابتوب مع بعض؟ دكتور عمرو حضرتك سامعني دلوقتي؟
ايوه
سامعني حضرتك كده تمام. دكتور عمرو حضرتك سامعني دلوقتي؟ دكتور عمرو حضرتك سامعني؟
كده عشان السبيكر.
كده شلت السبيكر. كده تسمعني؟ طب قافل التليفون؟ انا بس حاضر. شكرا. حضرتك سامعني؟
تمام يا دكتور، سامعين حضرتك كده تمام.
كده سامعني حضراتكم؟
سامعين حضرتك يا دكتور. ممكن نعمل شير برزنتيشن؟
حاضر، نعمل شير البرزنتيشن. طلعت يا فندم؟
لا لسه يا دكتور. كده ظهرت يا دكتور. تمام.
طيب تسمح لي يا استاذ عبد الرحمن ارحب بالدكتور عمرو؟
تمام يا دكتور، اتفضل طبعا.
دكتور عمرو برحب بيك الاول.
اهلا يا فندم، اهلا وسهلا.
انا عملت يعني برزنتيشن بسيطه عن حضرتك، عن البيوجرافي بتاعك
الله يخليك يا فندم.
ولكن يعني ما اسعدنيش الحظ ان حضرتك تكون موجود اثناءها، فانا عشان بتاعنا هسيب حضرتك تتفضل وتبتدي البرزنتيشن بتاعتك.
انا ما سمعتش البرزنتيشن اللي عليا يا فندم.
يا فندم اقولها تاني؟ حاضر، عينيا الاثنين.
او النبي عشان مراتي تسمعها يا جنبي.
اهلا بيك. انا قلت ببساطه يعني ان حضرتك ان دي ان شاء الله تبقى اللاست سبيتش معانا النهارده، وانا عارف ان هي التايتل بتاعها بيتكلم عن النانو بايو تكنولوجي في الكارديولوجي، وده توبيك يعني جميل نحب نسمع عنه. قلت ان حضرتك في الجهه العمل بتاعتك السنتر فور فاندامنتال فيزيكس في زويل يونيفرسيتي، واتكلمت قبل الكارير الدرجات العلميه اللي حضرتك حصلت عليها، ان انت حضرتك سنه 89 من جامعه اسكندريه في البكالوريوس في النيوكلير انجينيرنج، وبعدين سنه 92 في الMIT الماستر بتاعك في الماساتشوستس انستيتيوت اوف تكنولوجي، 94 من نفس الانستيتيوت برضو. وبعد كده الكارير بتاعك ابتدى سنه 90 وكان اخر حاجه سنه 2014 لما حضرتك عملت جويننج للسنتر فور فاندامنتال فيزيكس في زويل يونيفرسيتي. اتكلمت برضو على الريسيرش اريا بتاعتك بان هي بتعتمد مينلي على الديفلوبينج للفيزيكال كونسبتس والماثيماتيكال مودلز الجديده في اللي هي الابليكابل للديزاين والاناليسيز للنيوكلير رياكتورز والنيوكلير فيول سايكلز. اتكلمت برضو على عضويات حضرتك المختلفه وذكرت اهمها الامريكان نيوكلير سوسايتي والامريكان فيزيكال سوسايتي، بالاضافه ان حضرتك الديبيوتي تيم ليدر للايجيبشن نتورك فور هاي انرجي فيزيكس وممبر في الANS رياكتور.
انا بس اضيف لسعادتك معلش، هو في بس لبس شويه، هو كله صح بس في لبس. I'm working at Zuwayl City but actually I graduated from Faculty of Medicine قصر العيني University and I have another career as a heart surgeon. We do stuff about regenerative medicine. هو مثلا حصل لخبطه شويه معلش، انا بس اعدلها. I graduated.
تمام يا فندم، انا اعتذر بس هو دي البيانات اللي جات لي من اللي عمل الانفيتيشن يعني.
لا ده كده احسن، على يا ريت كنت خدت الحاجات دي احسن.
ماشي يا فندم.
يعني كده ممكن اخدها رسمي على فكره.
اتفضل يا فندم اتفضل.
يعني كده الشهادات دي هاخدها برضو رسمي، حق بقى خلاص.
اتفضل يا فندم.
فانا graduated من القصر العيني و I have a PhD from Virginia Commonwealth University with collaboration with Cairo University, and I have a master degree in surgery and diploma of application of lasers in biology and physics. And I work. I have two jobs. I'm a university professor at Zuwayl City and senior researcher in regenerative medicine. Also, I'm a heart surgeon at the National Heart Institute. وشكرا يا فندم على التقديم، وهاخد برضو الشهادات اللي حضرتك اديتهاني دي باذن الله برضو. ف هبتدي المحاضره. Shall I start? Can you hear me?
اتفضل يا فندم اتفضل.
Today we're going to talk about nanomedicine. It's a new field. It's a very interesting field, and what is its application in my career as a heart specialist or a surgeon. It's nanotechnology in cardiology. As you can see here, here with the Zueli student, we are dissecting a heart, big animal heart resembling human heart, and see what's going on here. And because the heart is the most difficult organ in regeneration, it takes us a hell of work to try to begin to regenerate and even to treat heart diseases. God made the solid state. He left the surface to the devil. Enrico Fermi. This is what a great scientist said, that God made the solid state. He left the surface for the devil. What he meant, that is a guy, a Nobel Prize winner in 1938 in physics. But why we talk about the surface? What is important about the surface than the inside of the matter? Why? This is the Earth, our planet Earth. We see people who live in different places do not look alike in their surface area. So people who live further from the equator look more like a sphere. They are short-limbed. They have a small surface area in their bodies. That's Allen's law. The further you live from the equator, the more you look like a sphere. This is Allen's rule. Okay? Because they have to balance between surface area and volume. I'm gonna show it in some illustrations, some photos. They have shorter legs, shorter arms. They want to maximize their volume because they don't want to lose heat. So more surface area, the more heat will lose. They're gonna lose. So that's why they want to minimize their surface area. They tend to be very short. Also in animal adaptation, look, this is a Eskimo dog. He tried to keep his surface area. So he has a very small ears. Also for the bears who live in the North Coast, in the cold climate, do not want to lose heat. Likewise, you go towards the equator, people are going to be taller and skinny. And that's because they want to maximize the surface areas. They want to get rid of heat. So in Africa, people look like this to increase their surface area because they want to lose heat. Okay, and this is the adaptations for animals. The same rabbit, the same species who live in a cold climate have a shorter ears, while in the warm climate, you want to get rid of the extra heat from the body. Also in rats, very different. The guy on the right tried to maximize his surface area to lose heat. And this is the beauty of what we're gonna talk about nanoparticles now. Also, this is our adaptations. When I feel cold, I take this posture to minimize my surface area. And opposite, when I get feeling hot. Asian and African elephants, of course, we can differentiate. With the big ears is the African. Oh my God, try to get rid of heat. This is the African, and to the left is the Asian. So, making small stuff, do things. What we mean by nano, that we are making small stuff do a big things. How come this? In the nano world, the law of physics change. The law of science become different. The material will acquire new properties, new physics, and new chemistry. Due to nanoparticles, due to their small size, nanomaterial have high specific surface area in relation to volume, a huge surface area, because they are nanoparticles. We keep cutting, increasing surface area. Like this movie, Fantastic Voyage, very old movie about scientists who get very small to get inside the body and fight a disease. This is the nanomedicine. Nanoparticles are so small, they contain just few atoms to a few thousand atoms, as opposed to bulk metals that may contain many billions of atoms. So nanoparticles contain only few atoms. But please God, we're gonna stick to few atoms. We don't want to go to subatomic world. In subatomic world, this is the range. It's from 1 to 100 nanometers only. We don't want to get smaller. It's very risky to get smaller. When you get smaller, the rules of physics will change. Here, in the in the real world, it has a logic. But if I can go, it's smaller in the subatomic particle, the world of subatomic particle will behave like this. Oh my God. Oh my God, electron can be in two places at the same time. My tennis ball can be in two places at the same time. I have no control in subatomic world. So let's stuck to only few atoms. This is our last cut for nanoparticles. So nanoparticles will give us what we call nanomedicine. Medicines at the nanoscale. This is a new branch of science. In cardiology and cardiac disease, we are facing two main problems: atherosclerosis and rheumatic heart disease. Okay, and this is the photo. One of my patients who are treated him from rheumatic fever. He has a damaged valve. Atherosclerosis. Atherosclerosis means stiffness of the coronary arteries. The arteries that feed your heart get narrowed and get calcified, and it ends up by fibrosis of the heart muscle, heart failure. Atherosclerosis is a global burden. Atherosclerosis kills more people than all cancers combined. And more than half of patients with atherosclerotic disease, their first presentation will be their last. I mean, their first presentation is sudden death. Atherosclerosis. Athero means Greek word. Athero means pasta. Sclerosis, hard pasta, hard stuff in the coronary arteries of the heart. So as I mentioned before, atherosclerosis kills more people than all cancer combined. It's a global burden. It's the worst disease on earth. Atherosclerosis can affect any arteries in the body, but it have a tendency to coronary arteries. Okay, and this is what I'm showing here is a coronary artery. The main cause is a very old story about atherosclerosis, about cholesterol, I meant. It's a very old history about cholesterol is the devil. Cholesterol is the devil. But I'm gonna mention you now the real story about cholesterol and we gonna treat it with nanoparticles. Honesty, it's a song by Billy Joel. Honesty, we are asking for honesty. So the honest story of cholesterol is the real story. It's my honesty that cholesterol is not the villain. It's not the bad guy. Cholesterol is not the bad guy. Okay? God created cholesterol to repair our damaged vessel. This is a coronary artery. The inner side is an intima. It's correspond to tears all the time because the heart is always moving, always contracting. So it always develops cracks. So God creates that beautiful thing called cholesterol to heal it because it's lipid to heal it. And the cell membrane has lipids. So it heals the damaged arteries. So what is the problem? The problem when we get oxidation of cholesterol from pollution and cigarette smoking. So the oxycholesterol will go to heal, but the immune system will attack him because he is not in his list. It is a foreign body. And the result of the battlefield will be something ugly like this, a dead macrophage labeled with cholesterol. And actually we call it atheroma. And this atheroma, if left untreated, will gonna block the whole artery and result in death of part of the heart. If it's small part, the patient will survive. If it's large part, it will gonna kill him. It's gonna kill him, and it start to form fibrous skeleton. Oxidation, as I mentioned, from free radicals. Free radical is cigarette smoking. So please do not smoke. I never smoked in my life. This is a fake photo. I never smoked in my never. Also, this is a lung of a smoker. Also, the chlorine in the water, too much chlorine are free radicals. And of course, homocysteine overload. This is a toxic amino acids. It accumulates when you have folic acid deficiency or vitamin B deficiency. And mainly what causes this is birth control pills for females. So what we are doing now, we are doing the model for atherosclerosis on rats. What I'm holding now is a laser source, and the rat is not shown here. It's hidden. You cannot see the rat. I'm holding the rat in my right hand and the laser system on my left hand to make the nano treatment. This is preclinical. We didn't apply it on humans yet. Okay, and here is the rat for examination. What will happen that the nanoparticles will go and be labeled around and inside the aceroma. Okay, the nanoparticle labeled with drug, and it has a huge surface area, and it's ready to destroy the plaque and destroy it completely. When it interacts with the laser beam, I mean the low power laser beam, okay, we call it photosensitizer. The drug is now it's photosensitizer. When it reacts with the light, it's gonna destroy the aceroma. It's not ready now for clinical, but we have preclinical studies, and this is the magic of nanoparticles, the huge surface area. The other disease is rheumatic heart disease. Rheumatic heart disease, streptococcal infection, repeated streptococcal infection in the throat of the children by Streptococcus pyogenes infection. Here we call it الميكروب السبحي, streptococcal infection. What will happen to your body? That immune system will react against this bacteria, this evil, and will develop antibody cross-reactivity. Reaction will spread to the skin, will cause subcutaneous nodule and erythema marginatum. Also will develop chorea. Okay, it will affect the brain. It will develop chorea. The child will do involuntary movement with his hands, involuntary sudden jerky movement with his hands, and it will affect the joint of the big joint of the leg. This is where it gets its name, arthritis. Gets its name, rheumatic arthritis. Then it will affect the heart. When it's gonna affect the heart, here is this dissection of a big animal model of the heart. I did it myself. We have a ring for a mitral valve, leaflet, chorda tendineae, and papillary muscles. It will affect the whole apparatus. Okay, and the worst thing about this infection that it forms a biofilm, so it is resistant to antibiotics. Some guys are unfortunately not lucky, and they develop that biofilm. Biofilm makes them resistant to antibiotics, so the procedure will continue for destruction of the valve. Here, destructed valve, I remove it from one of my patients. Here, completely fibrotic, calcific tips, completely destructive mitral valve. This is so bad. So here I remove it in the operating room. Disease mitral valve I'm holding now. And we replace it by what we call bioprosthetic valve. Till now, we don't have a suitable substitution for prosthetic valve, means a valve made from metal, not from a living tissue. Not yet. We don't have a valve made from living tissue, not yet in a mitral position. So this is a prosthetic valve. What the hell was a prosthetic valve? Prosthetic valve can cause thrombosis on it because it is abnormal surface. For the blood not to be coagulated, it has to move in surface covered by endothelium. But this is not endothelium, it is a metal. So it probably will cause coagulation and blood clots, and it's gonna kill the patient. Patient have to take every day a tablet of anticoagulant, every day, every whole day, every day in his life. So let's call for nanomedicine. Hopefully we start this researches. Look, this is a clot from a mechanical valve. My colleague and myself did this operation in emergency room one day at night, and we managed to save the patient's life. And this is a blood clot caused by the prosthetic valve. So it is in Egypt, it is about 5 child per 1,000. It is not low, it is high incidence, high burden for Egypt. So here is the destructed mitral valve. So what we are now trying to do, preclinical study, that we make nanoparticles around and on the surface of the prosthetic valve. a nanoparticle will be labeled with anticoagulant. So the patient will have his own anticoagulant toward his own valve, inside his own valve. So he he can stop taking one pill every day. When you are taking one saving life pill every day, it's very dangerous. If you forget to take it one day, you may get a blood clot, and blood clot may spread to the brain and may kill the patient, or at least cause him neurological defect. So the huge surface area, I mean, all about a huge surface area, we can put this anticoagulant and coat it for the valve, so patient can live safely. And this is the main applications of nanoparticles in the two problems, one concerning Egypt primary, and the other is the worldwide global disease, atherosclerosis. And now I come to the end. I want to thank you very much for inviting me to this conference. Thank you very much. Any questions?
دكتور محمد ممكن
ايوه
هل الموضوع مفتوح للمناقشه ولا في حد؟
Can you hear me?
ايوه انا سامع حضرتك. ايوه انا سامع حضرتك.
تحت امرك.
بس في ايكو انا مش عارف. دكتور عمرو حضرتك سامعني؟
انا سامع حضرتك.
في سؤال لو سمحت. حضرتك بتتكلم على البروستاتيك فالفز how they can be coated with the anticoagulants. ده حاجه مشابهه stents coronary hearts.
انا سامع ايكو مش سامع كلام والله يا فندم.
مش عارف ايه المشكله في الحقيقه. دكتور محمد، هل ممكن نحل المشكله؟
طب ثانيه واحده افتح من التليفون لحظه واحده.
دكتور عمرو حضرتك سامعني دلوقتي؟
ايوه دلوقتي.
دكتور عمرو دكتور محمد، ممكن ايرش يحلونا.
ايوه دكتور، احنا بنحاول نحل ايرور دلوقتي.
ايوه
دكتور استاذن حضرتك لو في حد فاتح اللابتوب او حاجه ممكن يبقى صوت بيطلع ويدخل تاني في السبيك.
ايوه يا فندم، حضرتك بتقول ايه؟
كده تمام يا دكتور، ممكن تقدروا تكملوا. الصوت واضح دلوقتي.
طيب
دكتور محمد متصل، ممكن حضرتك سؤال للدكتور عمرو؟ دكتور عمرو حضرتك سامعني؟
ايوه يا فندم.
انا كنت بسال حضرتك على البروستاتيك فالفز الموجوده، حضرتك بتقول دي ميتال وبتبقى كوتد بنانو ماتيريال وفيها انتي كواجلنت، يعني يعني
Yes.
عليها انتي كواجولانت. هل ده حاجه
Yes.
مشابهه للسمارت ميديكيتد ستانس اللي بتبقى موجوده في الكورونري ارتريز، اللي بتتحط في الكورونري ارتريز؟
ايوه تمام يا حضرتك، تمام تمام سؤال حضرتك طبعا تمام، بس الماده مختلفه يا فندم. في الكوروناري ارتس بتبقى انتي بليتلتس، حضرتك انتي بليتلتس دراج. في الفالف انتي كواجلانت دراج. واخد بال سعادتك؟
أيوة.
يعني نوع الدراج بيبقى في الاول اللي حضرتك ذكرته انتي بليتلتس، النوع الثاني ده لسه في طور التجارب، بس هيبقى انتي كواجلانتس نوت انتي بليتلتس.
كويس. اللي بيبقى في الكورونري ارتس ده بيبقى بليتلت كواجيليشن اجريجيشن.
تمام
لكن اللي
تمام يا
حضرتك
فندم.
بتتكلم عليه هيبقى انتي كواجيلنت في الباث واي، يعني بيوقف اي ستيب في الباث واي. مظبوط؟
تمام يا فندم تمام.
مظبوط. انا كنت بس عايز اسال حاجه يعني غريبه لفتت نظري في اللي حضرتك قلته لما حضرتك اتكلمت على الكوريا، يعني بيحصل كوريا في عمليه الناس اللي عندهم ريماتويد فيبر. انا اعرف الكوريا دي بتحصل نتيجه دامج في جزء في البرين، يعني
ايوه
بيزل جانجلي، يعني فايه علاقتها دي
لانه الكروس رياكتيفيتي الاوتو اميون سيستم لما بيجي يهاجم البكتيريا، بيهاجم انذر ريموت بارت ما فيهاش البكتيريا، اللي هو الهارت فالف وجزء من البرين وجزء والبيج جوينتس والسكن.
بما فيها عشان يعمل كوريا ديب اوف ذا برين، يعني ده في منطقه فيري ديب في البرين نفسه، فهل يعني ده برضه ممكن يحصل؟
ايه يا فندم السؤال؟
الكوريا دايما بتحصل نتيجه دامج في السيلز بتاعه البيزل جانجليا في البرين. فحضرتك قلت الروماتويد فيبر دي بتبقى واحده من السيمبتومز بتاعتها، فمش فاهم الكورليشن
أيوه.
بالظبط يعني ازاي بتحصل.
كورليشن ان هو بيهاجم الخلايا اللي سعادتك اشرت اليها، الاميون سيستم بيهاجم هذه الخلايا. ده من صفات الديزيز ده هو ان هو بيهاجم خلايا غير البكتيريا اللي بيهاجمها. فهو الاوبزرفيشن الخلايا اللي بيهاجمها اللي هو في البيزال جانجليا وفي السبكوتينيوس تيشو وفي البيج جوينتس وفي الاندوكارديوم اوف ذا مايترال فالف. ده الكاركتر بتاع الديزيز.
متشكر جدا لحضرتك يا دكتور عمرو، متشكر على المحاضره
تحت امرك
الشيقه.
يا فندم.
متشكر جدا على المحاضره الشيقه
تحت امرك، شرف ليا. شرف ليا، تحت امرك.
I hope that your wife is listening يعني to the flattering comment.
يا فندم؟
يعني اتعشى من حضرتك يعني نلتقي بيك تاني في presentations.
يا ريت ان شاء الله ربنا بس يفرج الغمه دي ونرجع نلتقي كلنا تاني ان شاء الله.
ان شاء الله. متشكر جدا لحضرتك.
شكرا يا فندم، شكرا. ثانك
دكتور
يو.
محمد. دكتور محمد منتصر، اتفضل حضرتك. دكتور محمد. Any more questions؟ هل في أي أسئلة؟ في أي حد يحب يوجه أي سؤال للدكتور عمرو زاهر؟ أوكي. دكتور محمد منتصر، هل ننهي السيشن؟ حضرتك سامعني؟
تمام يا فندم؟
تمام أنا سامع بس أنا مش سامع الدكتور محمد. الدكتور محمد منتصر وبعدين في أنا بس سامع صوتي يعني. خلاص كده هل ننهي السيشن كده؟
دكتور نقدر ننهي السيشن دلوقتي؟
اعتقد لاني
شكرا يا فندم، شكرا.
اعتقد
شكرا يا فندم، شكرا.
متشكر شكرا لحضراتكم جميعا. شكرا لحضراتكم
شكرا
جميعا.
يا فندم، الف شكر. شكرا يا فندم، الف شكر.
مع السلامه.